Elizabeth Morris knew something was wrong when her daughter brought a clipboard instead of clean clothes. Katie usually came to the assisted living center on Thursday evenings, after work and before supper. She brought fresh laundry, a grocery bag with the dark chocolate Elizabeth liked, and news from Helper that she thought would be safe to share. This time, she arrived on a Tuesday morning wearing her gray office coat. She set the clipboard on the little round table by the window and kept her purse on her shoulder. Elizabeth was already dressed. At 72, she still buttoned her own blouses, though her fingers complained in cold weather. Pneumonia had taken 12 pounds from her and left her breathing like she'd climbed stairs when she crossed a room. Even so, she'd made her bed and opened the blinds. From the second floor she could see the parking lot, a strip of dry grass, and the red cliffs beyond the highway. "You're early," Elizabeth said. "I moved some things around." Katie didn't sit. She slid a paper from the clipboard and placed it beside Elizabeth's cup. "What's this?" "Just something the realtor needs." Elizabeth read the first line. It gave permission to list the commercial property at 214 Foundry Road. She looked up. "Why does a realtor need anything?" Katie took a breath through her nose. She had done that as a girl whenever she was trying not to sound impatient. "Mom, we've been through this. The shop costs money every month. Insurance, taxes, utilities. The roof is failing. You can't run it anymore." "I didn't say I was going to run it. You can't live there either." Elizabeth put the paper down. "I have an apartment there. You have 2 rooms behind an industrial building. I have a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. The place has been shut since Dad died. Not shut." "I kept heat in the apartment." Katie finally pulled out the other chair. She sat on its edge, knees together, purse still hanging from her shoulder. "You're recovering from pneumonia. You were in the hospital for 9 days." "I remember. Then rehabilitation. I remember that too. You need help with medication and meals. You need someone close if your breathing gets bad again." Elizabeth waited. Katie was using the voice she used with service clerks and insurance companies, calm enough that disagreement sounded unreasonable. "What I needed," Elizabeth said, "was 3 weeks of rehabilitation. And you got it. 3 weeks ended last Friday." Katie glanced toward the open door. The room across the hall had a television playing a morning game show. Someone laughed when a bell rang. A cart rolled past with plastic cups of water and little paper packets of pills. Elizabeth touched the top of the listing form. "Why am I still here?" Katie's mouth tightened. "Because Willow Creek had a room available, and the rehabilitation wing recommended continued support." "Recommended to whom?" "To both of us." "No. They told me I was improving. They told me you shouldn't be alone yet. That isn't the same thing." Katie looked down at her hands. She had always hated direct conflict, but she didn't mind arranging things that caused it. There was a difference, and Elizabeth was only now allowing herself to see how large that difference had become. "The transfer paperwork is already done," Katie said. "Your things are in storage. I paid the first month." Elizabeth didn't move. Her blue cup had a chip along the handle. She ran her thumb over it once. "What things?" "From the house. The apartment." "Fine. The apartment. What did you take?" "Clothes, photographs, your good lamp, toiletries, things you'll use here." "And the shop?" "We had to clear it." The air seemed to thin before Elizabeth's lungs did. She leaned back and took a slow breath through her nose. "What does that mean?" Katie reached for the clipboard, then stopped. "Mom, what does clear it mean?" The dealer took the machinery and tools that still had resale value. Elizabeth stared at her daughter. There had been a jointer near the north wall, a cabinet saw Harold had rebuilt twice, a mortising machine with a stubborn foot pedal, and hand planes arranged by size in the locked cabinet. Some tools had belonged to Harold's father. Others Elizabeth had bought herself after earning her first large commission. Their names were written in pencil behind drawers and under wooden cases, not because anyone might steal them, but because a working shop swallowed things. "Who gave you permission?" "I have power of attorney, for bills if I was too sick to manage them. It covers property. It was never meant for selling the business. The business hasn't operated in years. That doesn't make the tools yours. I didn't say they were mine. Who bought them?" "A used equipment dealer out of price." "For how much?" Katie looked toward the hall again. "For how much, Katie?" $8,400. Elizabeth's fingers closed over the edge of the table. The amount was so small that it embarrassed her more than a larger one might have. The cabinet saw and joiner alone could have brought most of it from the right buyers. The carving tools had been worth more as a set than some people's cars. Katie wouldn't have known which ones were special. She had probably seen steel, dust, and old wooden handles. Where is the money? It went into the account I've been using for your expenses. What expenses? Storage. This room. The dealer's hauling fee. Cleaning the shop. There'll be more once we list it. We aren't listing it. Katie pushed the paper closer. Aaron agrees it needs to be sold. That hurt in a cleaner way. Aaron hadn't visited since Elizabeth left rehabilitation. He sent short messages asking whether she needed anything, then answered late when she said she did. Did Aaron help sell my tools? No. He knew we were clearing the building, so he knew. He understands the situation. Elizabeth turned the listing form around and pushed it back. I'm not signing. Mom, don't do this. Do what? Make every decision harder because you're upset. I am upset. I know, but the property is losing value. The longer we wait, the less there'll be to divide later. Elizabeth heard that last word clearly. Divide? Katie's face changed. Only a little, but enough. Eventually, between Aaron and me, that's what Dad intended. Your father intended to die before me? That isn't what I meant. Then don't talk as if I'm gone. Katie stood and walked to the window. She looked at the parking lot without seeing it. She had spent weeks telling herself that she was solving a problem. Her mother had been sick. The shop was deteriorating. Bills arrived whether anyone felt ready or not. Katie wanted credit for doing what Aaron had avoided, and she couldn't understand why her mother saw theft where she saw efficiency. The realtor says the shop will be difficult, she said. The lot has some value, but the building needs work. The apartment makes it awkward. The equipment buyers wouldn't even take that enormous workbench. They called it immovable junk. Elizabeth lifted her head. Harold's maple bench? The one bolted to the floor. Your father built that bench. I know. No, you don't. Katie turned from the window. They left it, Mom. It's still there. Elizabeth remembered Harold flattening that maple top by hand after a delivery driver cracked the old one. He had worked 3 evenings with a plane, checking the surface against a long steel straight edge. Later, when his hands began to shake, he still cleaned that bench every Friday. He could leave sawdust on windowsills and coffee cups under the drill press, but the bench was always clear. What else did they leave? I don't have an inventory in my head. You sold a shop without an inventory? There's paperwork. I want it. I can bring it next time. Bring it today. I'm due back at work. Then email it. Katie reached for the clipboard. We can talk when you're calmer. Elizabeth placed her hand on the listing form. This stays. Why? Because my name is on it. Katie released the metal clip. Elizabeth pulled the unsigned form free, folded it once, and put it in the drawer beside her bed. It wasn't much of a victory. Still, Katie's face showed that she had expected the signature. That small surprise gave Elizabeth something she hadn't felt since the hospital, a little space around her own decision. Katie adjusted her purse strap. I'll come Thursday. Send me every paper from the tool sale before then. I said I would. And don't go into the shop again. Mom, I have keys. You had keys because I was ill. You're still ill. Elizabeth looked at her until Katie dropped her eyes. I'm recovering, Elizabeth said. Those are different words. Katie left without hugging her. The door remained open. Elizabeth listened to her daughter's heels pass the medication cart, turn at the lounge, and fade toward the elevator. Only then did she take a deeper breath. It caught halfway down. She waited, one hand against her ribs, until the tightness eased. A staff member named Denise came to the doorway carrying clean towels. She was a broad woman with silver glasses and a habit of knocking even when the door stood open. Everything all right in here? No. Denise glanced down the hall. Do you need the nurse? I need my admission folder. Your daughter has the financial copies. I want whatever I signed. Denise set the towels on the dresser. I can ask the front desk. Please do. Elizabeth opened the bedside drawer again. Beneath the listing form lay her reading glasses, a comb, 2 cough drops, and an envelope with Willow Creek printed across the corner. She took out the envelope. Inside was a monthly statement. She had seen the total before, but she had believed it covered rehabilitation. The charges were listed differently now. Room and board, medication management, laundry, personal assistance. The monthly rate was more than the pension deposit that entered her checking account. At the bottom, Katie was named as responsible contact and authorized agent. Elizabeth picked up her phone. The bank's number was saved in her contacts, but the call required an account code she couldn't remember. She tried the year she and Harold opened the shop. It failed. She tried Harold's birth year. That failed too. After the third attempt, the automated voice offered to connect her with a representative. A young man answered and asked several questions. Elizabeth gave her full name, address, and the last deposit amount she remembered. Then he asked whether she authorized Katie Morris to continue receiving account information. "No," Elizabeth said. There was a pause in the sound of keys. "To remove an authorized agent, you may need to visit a branch. What can you do today?" "I can place an additional verbal password on the telephone access." "Do it. What password would you like?" Elizabeth looked at the pale wall across from her bed. Harold used to choose passwords that anyone who knew him could guess. Maple, Mortis, Foundry. She chose something Katie wouldn't expect. "Blue Apron," she said. The representative asked her to repeat it, then confirmed the change. It didn't cancel the power of attorney. It didn't restore the tools or get Elizabeth out of Willow Creek. But it closed one small door that Katie had been walking through without asking. Denise returned with a folder and a visitor's pen attached to a plastic flower. "This is what the front desk could print," she said. "They said your daughter completed the financial agreement. Did I agree to live here?" Denise pulled out the chair Katie had used. She didn't answer immediately. "You signed consent for rehabilitation when you came from the hospital. The long-term room is separate. Did I sign that? I don't see your signature on this copy." Elizabeth read each page. Katie had signed as agent. The move had been described as necessary continued care. There was a note about impaired stamina and temporary medication supervision, but nothing saying Elizabeth couldn't make decisions. "Can I leave?" Denise folded her hands. "You aren't under an order to stay, but you'll need a safe discharge plan. Somewhere to sleep, medications arranged, transportation. I have somewhere." "The shop apartment?" Elizabeth looked up. "How did you know?" "Your daughter told the front desk it wasn't livable. She hasn't slept there." Denise nodded toward Elizabeth's portable oxygen unit beside the dresser. "Can it handle your equipment?" "I only use that if my level drops. There's power in the apartment. Is there water?" "There was. Heat?" "There was." Those answers sounded less solid each time. Elizabeth hadn't entered the apartment since before she got sick. Katie had emptied it. A neglected pipe could split during one cold night. Someone might have turned off the furnace. The shop roof had leaked near the finishing room the winter before Harold died, and Elizabeth had paid for a patch without climbing up to inspect it. She closed the folder. "May I use the printer downstairs?" Denise looked at her carefully. "For what?" "To revoke a power of attorney." By noon, Elizabeth had spoken to the small law office that prepared the original document. The receptionist found her file and explained what had to be signed and witnessed. Elizabeth wrote the instructions on the back of the assisted living statement. Her handwriting shook on the first line, so she rested her hand, flexed each sore finger, and began again. After lunch, she called Carolyn Nunez. Carolyn had kept the books from Morris Cabinet Millwork for nearly 3 decades. She had also visited Elizabeth twice in the hospital, bringing unscented hand cream and news that wasn't softened for a sick room. "Carolyn," Elizabeth said when she answered, "do you still have your car?" There was a brief silence. "I still have my car. I need a ride to Foundry Road tomorrow. Has your doctor released you?" "My doctor released me from rehabilitation. Everyone else has been making up the rest." Carolyn understood enough not to waste time sounding shocked. "What time?" 10. "I'll be there at 9:30. Bring warm clothes." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Then she crossed the room slowly, unplugged her oxygen unit from the wall, and opened the closet. Katie had left 3 blouses, 2 pairs of trousers, a winter coat, and Elizabeth's old brown suitcase on the top shelf. Elizabeth pulled the suitcase down with both hands. It was empty. She set it on the bed, unfastened the brass latches, and began packing. She chose the clothes by use, not appearance. Warm trousers, thick socks, 2 cardigans, and the blue work shirt Katie had mistaken for sleepwear. At the bottom of the closet, she found her flat leather shoes in a plastic bag. The toes were scratched, and one lace had been replaced with brown cord. Harold used to call them her sensible shoes, usually when she was wearing them, somewhere he thought required nicer ones. She packed her medicines last. Katie had arranged them in a weekly box labeled with morning and evening slots. Elizabeth copied the names from each bottle onto a sheet of paper. She hated needing that list. Before the hospital, she could have named every tablet by shape and color. Pneumonia had left gaps in ordinary places. At supper, she sat with 3 women who discussed mashed potatoes as if someone had committed an offense against them. Elizabeth usually listened. That evening she ate everything on her plate, including the carrots, because she knew Carolyn would ask. A staff member brought the forms from the law office shortly before 7. Elizabeth signed the revocation in front of 2 employees. One witnessed her signature, and the other notarized it from a stamp kit kept at the front desk. The instructions said copies had to be delivered to Katie and any business relying on the old authority. Elizabeth asked the front desk to scan 1 copy to her bank. She emailed another to Katie herself. Her daughter called less than 5 minutes later. "Mom, what did you do?" Elizabeth stepped into the small alcove beside the vending machines. Someone had left a half-finished puzzle on the table there. A blue sky spread across most of it, with 6 pieces missing. "I revoked the power of attorney." "You can't just do that." "I just did." "You need someone handling things." "I need my statements and keys." "Why would you need the shop keys?" "They're mine." "I'm not arguing about this over the phone." "Then don't." Katie went quiet. When she spoke again, the edge had gone from her voice, which made Elizabeth more cautious. "I'm trying to keep you safe. Send the tool records. I will." "You said that this morning. I'm at home now. They're on my work computer. Send them before you go to bed." "What difference does tonight make? It tells me whether you mean what you say." Katie let out a breath. "Fine." The call ended without either woman saying goodnight. Elizabeth stood beside the vending machines for another minute. Her knees felt loose. She had argued with suppliers over warped lumber, and once refused an entire delivery of cherry because the mill tried to hide sapwood in the middle of the stack. Saying no had never frightened her at work. With Katie, she kept expecting the conversation to end in permanent damage. That fear had been useful to other people, though she couldn't lay all of it at their feet. After Harold died, Katie had begun coming every Sunday. At first she brought groceries and stayed for coffee. Then she started sorting the mail into piles. Bills went on the left. Personal letters went on the right. Anything she considered junk disappeared before Elizabeth saw it. "Let me make this easier," Katie would say. Elizabeth had let her. Aaron handled the heavier jobs. He changed furnace filters, carried salt to the water softener, and climbed a ladder when the gutters clogged. He never came empty-handed. He brought a wrench, a package of light bulbs, or a bag of drive-through hamburgers. Then he walked through the shop and talked about what would have to be done someday. "You shouldn't have to worry about this place," he often said. Elizabeth heard concern because concern was what she wanted from him. She told herself that accepting help kept the family close. She didn't ask why both children were more comfortable helping with her property than sitting with her grief. When Katie wanted online access to the bank account, Elizabeth provided it. When Aaron asked what Harold's insurance had paid, she told him. When they spoke about the shop as something they would eventually have to settle, she corrected them once, then let it pass. She had mistaken silence for peace because peace was the thing she thought a mother was supposed to maintain. Her phone chimed at 8:43. Katie had sent 6 photographs of papers laid on a kitchen counter. The dealer's invoice filled 2 pages. Elizabeth enlarged the images with her fingers and read the list. Cabinet saw, jointer, planer, mortiser, drill press, dust collector, assorted portable power tools, assorted hand tools, lumber racks and contents. Most of it had been sold in groups with no brands, condition notes, or individual prices. The hauling fee had been taken out before payment. The amount deposited was $7,700. There was also a handwritten page from the dealer. At the bottom, beneath several crossed-out items, someone had written, "Large maple workbench bolted through slab. Customer declined removal. No resale allowance." Elizabeth read it twice. The bench hadn't merely been overlooked. Katie had offered it. Someone had inspected it, rejected it, and left it standing. She saved every photograph to her phone and emailed copies to herself. Then she sent Katie one sentence. "I need the original papers and all keys tomorrow." Katie didn't answer. At 9:15, Aaron called. Elizabeth had been expecting him. Katie always called Aaron when their mother disagreed with her. Aaron would wait a little while, then approach as if his involvement were accidental. "I hear you're leaving Willow Creek," he said. That was quick. Katie's worried. "Are you?" "Of course I'm worried." "Then ask how I'm feeling." He hesitated. "How are you feeling?" "Tired." "Well, that's my point. No, it isn't. Aaron lowered his voice. He was probably in the basement of his house, away from the television. He disliked being overheard during family calls, though he repeated almost everything to Katie afterward. Mom, nobody's trying to keep you somewhere you don't want to be. We just need a reasonable plan. I made one. Going back to that shop isn't a plan. I'm going to the apartment. It's the same building. It's my building. For now. Elizabeth sat down on the edge of her bed. What does that mean? It means you've already got an interested realtor. If the building sells, you could move somewhere decent. Maybe a small condo in price. Katie found one with an elevator. So, the two of you have been shopping for my next home. We've been looking at options, without me. We didn't want to bother you while you were sick. There it was again. Every decision had been made to spare her from the burden of making it. Elizabeth rubbed the base of her thumb. The joint was swollen from writing and packing. Did you see the shop before the tools were sold? Aaron waited just long enough to answer the question. I stopped by. Did you know the dealer was coming? Katie said she was getting estimates. Did you help choose him? No. Did you tell her to wait until I could speak? Another pause. She had legal authority. Elizabeth closed her eyes. Harold had loved Aaron in a plain, uncomplicated way. They could work for an hour without speaking, then eat sandwiches on the loading step. After Harold died, Aaron came to the shop less often. Elizabeth had believed it was because the place hurt him. Now she wondered whether he had already begun seeing every machine as a number waiting to be divided. I'm going home tomorrow, she said. Just wait until the weekend. I can come down and we'll all sit together. You mean you and Katie will explain your plan? No, we'll talk. We're talking now. That's not fair. Neither was selling my tools. I didn't sell them. You knew enough to stop it. Aaron's voice changed. The warmth went out of it. If you go back there and something happens, don't expect Katie to drop everything again. Elizabeth looked at the packed suitcase. She wanted to ask whether he would come if she needed him. She wanted him to say yes before she had to ask. That old need rose so quickly that it embarrassed her. I won't expect anything, she said. Mom, that's not what I meant. It's what you said. She ended the call. For most of her life, Elizabeth had believed there was dignity in being the person who could be counted on. She remembered birthdays, delivered casseroles, kept spare keys, and loaned money without mentioning it later. When her children became adults, she continued making Sunday dinner because both still came. After Harold died, she kept setting out 4 plates until Aaron began arriving late, and Katie started bringing containers for leftovers before they had eaten. Elizabeth didn't need their permission to go home. The painful part was that some piece of her still wanted them to approve. She turned off the lamp and lay awake in the narrow bed. Through the wall came the low murmur of a television and the occasional ring of a call button. Around midnight, an aide entered to check the oxygen unit. I'm not using it, Elizabeth whispered. We still have to check. The aide read the gauge and left. At 6:30 the next morning, Elizabeth showered, dressed, and sat on the closed suitcase while fastening her shoes. Her breathing held steady. She checked it with a small fingertip meter from her bedside drawer. The number was acceptable, though not as high as before the pneumonia. Breakfast came on a tray. She ate the egg, saved the sealed packet of crackers, and put it in her purse. Then she removed the facility's plastic identification band from her wrist with a pair of nail scissors. Carolyn arrived at 9:27, wearing a red quilted coat and carrying a thermos. Her gray hair was pinned at the back of her neck. She looked first at Elizabeth, then at the suitcase and oxygen unit. You packed like you mean it, she said. I do. Did you eat? Yes. All of it? Enough. Carolyn accepted that. She poured coffee into the thermos lid and handed it to Elizabeth. The discharge took nearly an hour. A nurse reviewed medicines and follow-up appointments. The front desk printed a balance Katie had not yet paid. Elizabeth read it, folded it, and put it with the dealer's invoice. When asked who would assist her at home, she said, Carolyn is driving me. I'll arrange the rest. Carolyn didn't correct her. Outside, the July sun was bright, but the morning air still carried a desert chill. Elizabeth stopped beneath the entrance canopy. For a moment, the distance to Carolyn's car looked farther than it was. Carolyn waited without reaching for her arm. I can carry the suitcase, she said. That would help. Elizabeth kept the oxygen unit and walked beside her. Once they were on the road, Carolyn didn't ask for the whole story. She drove south through town, past the grocery store and the old rail yard, coal trucks had left black dust along the edges of the highway. Harold used to complain when that dust got into the finish room, Carolyn said. He complained when ordinary dust got into the finish room. That too. Elizabeth watched familiar streets past the window. Did Katie call you? Last night. What did she say? That you were confused and angry. Which part did you believe? The angry part. Elizabeth almost smiled. Carolyn kept both hands on the wheel. She asked me not to pick you up. What did you tell her? That you asked first. It was a small thing, but Elizabeth felt it settle inside her. Carolyn had not judged which woman sounded more responsible. She had listened to the person whose life was being arranged. They turned onto Foundry Road. Morris Cabinet Millwork stood behind a wire fence, its faded green sign still fixed above the loading door. The brick front looked the same from a distance. Up close, Elizabeth could see a dark stain spreading below the roofline. Weeds pushed through cracks in the gravel lot. Carolyn parked beside the rear apartment. Elizabeth took her keyring from her purse. The apartment key entered the lock, but wouldn't turn. She tried again. Katie changed it, she said. Carolyn opened her own purse and removed a small brass key from a side pocket. I kept the office key after Harold died. I always meant to return it. The office entrance was around the side of the building. They walked slowly, Carolyn carrying the suitcase and Elizabeth carrying the thermos and oxygen unit. The brass key stuck halfway, then turned. The door opened into a cold hallway smelling of sawdust and damp plaster. Elizabeth reached inside and found the switch. Nothing happened. Carolyn used her phone light. The beam passed over empty wall brackets, pale squares where cabinets had hung, and fresh tracks left by heavy machinery. At the end of the hallway, the light reached the open shop. Nearly every tool was gone. In the middle of the bare concrete floor, Harold's maple workbench stood exactly where he had bolted it, too large for the dealer and too familiar for Elizabeth to look at for long. She set down the oxygen unit, took the office key from Carolyn, and closed her fingers around it. "Let's find the breaker box," she said. The breaker box was in the finishing room, behind a metal cabinet the dealer hadn't wanted. Carolyn held the phone light, while Elizabeth read the labels written in Harold's square printing: office, apartment, shop lights, dust system, north wall, finish room. The main switch was down. Every smaller breaker was down with it. "Stand back," Elizabeth said. Carolyn gave her a look. "You're the one who just left assisted living. I know how a breaker works. I know you know. That doesn't make old wiring young." Elizabeth examined the panel without touching it. There was no heat around the box, no burned smell, and no blackening near the switches. She turned on the main, then the breaker marked office. A fluorescent tube above them blinked twice and filled the room with thin white light. "Well," Carolyn said, "one thing still listens to you." Elizabeth turned on the apartment breaker. Somewhere behind the wall, a refrigerator began to hum. She left the shop circuits off. The inside door to the apartment was at the rear of the office. It opened into the kitchen, so Katie's new exterior lock didn't matter. Elizabeth entered slowly, expecting disorder. There wasn't much left to disturb. The table and 2 chairs were gone. So were the small television, the microwave, and the oak chest Harold had made for extra blankets. Pale rectangles marked the walls where pictures had hung. Someone had taken the curtains but left the rods. The refrigerator was empty and clean. A strip of blue tape held its door shut. Carolyn put the suitcase beside the bedroom doorway. "Did Katie say where your furniture went?" "Storage." "Which storage?" She didn't say. Elizabeth turned on the kitchen faucet. It coughed air, then gave a thin stream the color of weak tea. She let it run until it cleared. The water pressure remained low. She opened the cabinet below the sink. The shut-off valves were fully open and the pipes were dry. In the bathroom, the cold tap behaved the same way. The toilet tank filled slowly, but didn't leak. "Could be the building valve," Elizabeth said. "Could be the city side. I paid the city bill. You paid the electric too, but someone switched everything off." Elizabeth knew Carolyn was right. Restoring power had proved the building wasn't dead. It had also shown that somebody had deliberately made it look that way. She checked the thermostat. It read 62 degrees, too cold for July. Even in a shaded brick building, the furnace control was set to off. When she changed it to fan, air moved through the vent carrying a dry, dusty smell. She shut it down again. "I'm not trusting that until it's checked." "Good," Carolyn said. "You don't have to sound surprised." "I wasn't surprised. I was relieved." They found the main water valve in a utility closet off the shop. It had been turned almost closed. Elizabeth wrapped a cloth around the handle and tried to move it. Pain ran from her thumb into her wrist. Carolyn reached past her. "Let me. If you force it, you'll break the stem. Then tell me how." Elizabeth showed her where to hold the wrench and how much pressure to apply. Carolyn leaned carefully. The handle moved a quarter turn, stopped, then moved again. From the apartment came the stronger rush of water. That sound gave Elizabeth more satisfaction than it should have. It was only plumbing. Still, water meant coffee, medicine, a shower, and a toilet that didn't take 10 minutes to refill. It meant the apartment could support an ordinary day. They returned to the kitchen and let both taps run. "I need food," Elizabeth said. "A chair, bedding, and a new lock. You need to sit before you make a longer list." Carolyn brought one of the office chairs into the apartment. The vinyl seat had split along one seam, but it held. Elizabeth sat near the kitchen counter while Carolyn opened the thermos. The first sip of coffee tasted faintly of metal. Elizabeth drank it anyway. Carolyn leaned against the sink. "There's something I didn't tell you on the drive." Elizabeth lowered the cup. "When Katie called, she said you were going back to stop the sale. There isn't a sale yet. That's what I thought." She made it sound farther along. "She brought me a listing agreement. Did you sign?" "No." "Then there's no realtor with permission to sell it." Elizabeth turned the cup between her hands. Katie had spoken as if the decision were waiting only for paperwork. Aaron had spoken as if a future buyer already had a claim on the place. Neither had said an offer existed. Did she name the realtor? "No. I'll ask for everything in writing." Carolyn nodded. She had once spent an entire afternoon refusing to pay a lumber invoice because the board count was wrong by 7. Harold called her difficult that day, then gave her a raise at the end of the month. Elizabeth stood. "Where are you going?" "To inventory what's left. You just sat down." "And now, I'm getting up." The shop seemed larger without machines. Empty electrical drops hung from the ceiling. Sawdust had collected beneath the places where equipment feet had protected the floor. The dealer had taken the rolling carts, clamps, extension cords, and even the metal trash cans. Elizabeth used her phone to photograph each wall. She began at the loading door and moved clockwise, naming what had occupied every space. "Band saw there," she said. "Lathe beside it. Clamp rack on that wall. Hand tool cabinet near the office." Carolyn wrote in an old ledger she found in the desk. "Was the cabinet locked?" "Yes." "Who had the key?" "I did." "Katie took my key ring at the hospital." "Did Harold keep a spare?" "In the office drawer, but it isn't there now." They reached the north wall. A line of holes showed where the lumber rack had been fastened. The rack and its contents had appeared as one item on the dealer's invoice. There was no species list, no board count, and no photograph. Elizabeth crouched to inspect a broken strip of maple near the baseboard. Her breath shortened before her knees began to hurt. She rose carefully and waited until the room steadied. "You're done bending today," Carolyn said. "I'm not done looking." "You can look standing up." The workbench occupied the center section of the shop. Its maple top was nearly 4 inches thick, worn smooth at the front edge. 2 heavy wooden vises remained attached. The dealer had taken the loose bench dogs, but he hadn't managed to empty the shallow drawer beneath the top. It held pencils, chalk, a folding ruler, and a single cabinet scraper. Elizabeth picked up the scraper. The steel was dark with age and slightly curved from use. Harold had ground one corner round so it wouldn't cut into soft molding. Elizabeth ran her thumb beside the edge, not across it. "Mine," she said. Carolyn smiled. "Put it somewhere safe." Elizabeth slipped it into the pocket of her blue shirt. It was the first tool she had recovered, and it weighed less than a dinner fork. She felt better with it there. They continued the inventory. Behind the workbench, a metal conduit came down from the ceiling and entered a junction box at waist height. Elizabeth remembered Harold adding new outlets along that wall, but the box looked wrong. It had no receptacle, no switch, and no cover plate that served any obvious purpose. A second section of conduit left the bottom of the box. It disappeared behind the rear leg of the bench and seemed to enter the wall near the floor. Elizabeth moved closer. "Shine your phone here." Carolyn aimed the light. The conduit was newer than the pipe above it. Its bends were neat and tight, the work of someone who had measured instead of adjusting as he went. Was that there when you kept the books? Elizabeth asked. I kept the books. I didn't inspect the wiring. Harold told you every change that cost money. He didn't always tell me before he spent it. Elizabeth looked at the bench bolts. 4 steel rods passed through the feet and into the slab. The nuts showed no recent tool marks. The dealer hadn't tried very hard to move it, which was fortunate. Even unbolted, the bench would require equipment and several people. She took a photograph of the junction box. Do you have a voltage tester? Carolyn asked. Not anymore. Carolyn glanced around the empty shop. Right. Elizabeth checked the dealer's invoice on her phone again. Electrical equipment wasn't listed, and the building wiring had not been part of the sale. Katie might not know whether a tester had been taken with the hand tools. We need someone who can tell us what's safe, Elizabeth said. I know someone. You know everyone who ever worked here. I know William. Elizabeth looked up. She hadn't seen William Yang since Harold's memorial service. He had apprenticed under Harold before starting his own preservation company. In those early years, he arrived before daylight, swept without being asked, and ruined enough pine to learn patience. Harold trusted him with difficult work long before he trusted him to speak to customers. What would William want with this place? He's been trying to reach you. He has my number. He had Katie's number. She told him you weren't taking business calls. Elizabeth felt the words before she understood them. What business? Something at the courthouse. He called me 2 weeks ago because he needed old Morris patterns. I told him you might know where Harold stored them. Elizabeth looked toward the empty wall where the pattern cabinets had once stood. They had contained common profiles, sample corners, and test pieces. Most were useful only if someone understood Harold's numbering system. The dealer invoice doesn't mention patterns. Maybe he called them lumber. Patterns aren't lumber. The man wrote assorted hand tools on one line. I don't think careful naming troubled him. Elizabeth opened the photographs Katie had sent and enlarged every page. No templates, no gauges, no patterns. Did William tell Katie what they were worth? He told her he needed them for a job. That isn't what I asked. I don't know what he told her. Elizabeth called William from the shop. He answered on the 4th ring. His voice was lower than she remembered, but he said her name immediately. Elizabeth, are you all right? I'm standing in the shop. There was a silence. I thought you were in care. I was in rehabilitation. What patterns do you need? William didn't ask another personal question. That was one thing Harold had liked about him. Courthouse restoration. The West Hearing Room. We removed a damaged window surround and found earlier molding beneath it. It matches work Morris did during the old renovation. I need the working profile, not just the finished dimensions. Which courthouse? The county courthouse. Do you have a job number? Harold's number was probably in the 1990s. I can bring photographs. Bring a voltage tester, too. William paused. Why? There's conduit on the north wall that I don't recognize. I can come this afternoon. I need groceries first. Come at 3. Carolyn watched her end the call. You sound like yourself when you're giving someone a time. I am myself. I know. At 3 minutes before 3, William arrived in a white work truck with wooden sample cases strapped behind the cab. He stepped down carefully. His hair had gone white at the temples, and his right shoulder sat lower than the left from years of lifting. He greeted Carolyn with a nod, then stopped in the shop doorway. His eyes moved across the empty floor. Where are the machines? Sold, Elizabeth said. All of them? All the ones a dealer wanted. William's jaw tightened, but he didn't offer sympathy. He set his tool case on the office desk and took out a small tester. They returned to the workbench. Elizabeth turned on the north wall breaker. William checked the upper conduit first, then touched the tester to the box. A red light appeared. The device gave a steady tone. Live, he said. He traced the lower conduit until the bench blocked his reach. Then he went into the adjoining finishing room to look for where the line emerged. It didn't. There should be an outlet or another box on that side, he said. There isn't. Could run under the slab. Harold hated floor trenches. William checked the wall measurements with a tape. He measured from the shop corner, then repeated the distance in the finishing room. The numbers didn't agree. He measured again. This wall is deeper than it should be, he said. How much? Close to 6 feet. Carolyn lowered the ledger. Elizabeth looked from the blank wall to the bolted maple bench. The power line entered a section of the building that, according to the rooms around it, had no reason to exist. She switched off the north wall breaker. Nobody touches that bench, she said. Not until we know what's behind it and whether the floor can carry the move. William left the breaker off and marked it with red tape. "Do you have a recent inspection?" he asked. "No." "Roof report?" "No." "Any record of the last electrical work?" "Harold did most of it himself." "That doesn't mean it was wrong. It means there may not be a record." William closed the panel door. "Then we start with what we can see." He brought 2 sample cases from his truck and opened them on the workbench. Inside were sections of painted molding from the courthouse. One piece had split through the center. Beneath several layers of cream paint, the wood showed dark and close-grained. Elizabeth put on her glasses. "Walnut," she said. "That's what I thought." "You thought, or you tested it?" "I tested it." She gave him a brief nod. Harold used to ask the same question, usually after William offered an answer too quickly. William handed her a photograph of the courthouse window surround. Parts of the molding were missing. Other sections had been repaired with pieces that matched the width, but not the curve. Even in a photograph, the difference was obvious. "Those later pieces are wrong," Elizabeth said. "The county knows. Who made them? Does it matter?" "It always matters." William almost smiled. "A contractor from Salt Lake, years ago." Elizabeth laid the photograph beside the sample. "Harold cut this profile with 3 passes, maybe 4. He wouldn't have used a single-shaped knife. That's why I need his working pattern." "You said patterns, plural." "There are 12 windows, 2 door surrounds, and a judge's rail. The rail has a related profile, but it isn't the same." "Did you remove anything else?" "Only damaged pieces. The rest stays in place." "Good." William had expected to find her weak. He was ashamed of that expectation now. She moved slowly and stopped to catch her breath, but her eye remained exact. In less than 5 minutes, she had noticed what his crew spent a morning debating. He took out another photograph. This mark was on the back of the oldest piece. The image showed a shallow cut, 3 short lines inside a rough circle. Elizabeth recognized it. Harold used the mark on work that belonged to a numbered sequence. It wasn't a signature. It told the shop which template and cutter order had been used. "That means there was a pattern card," she said. "Do you know where?" "The pattern drawers were on the north wall." They both looked at the clean patches where the cabinets had hung. "Did the dealer take the cabinets?" William asked. He took whatever was attached lightly enough to remove. Carolyn turned a page in the old ledger. "The invoice doesn't list cabinets. It doesn't list half of what's missing," Elizabeth said. William wrapped the courthouse sample and returned it to the case. "I can ask my crew whether anyone has seen Morris patterns for sale." "No," Elizabeth said. "Why not?" "Because we don't know they were sold. I don't want people looking for something before I know what's missing." William accepted that. "Then, what do you want me to do?" "Check the apartment. Change the exterior lock if you can. I'll pay you. You don't need to pay me for a lock." "I didn't ask whether I needed to." He looked at her, then nodded. "I'll write an invoice." Carolyn left for groceries while William inspected the apartment outlets. 2 had loose faceplates. One near the bed showed heat damage around the lower socket. He disconnected that outlet and capped the wires. The refrigerator circuit tested safely. So did the bathroom light and the outlet near the kitchen counter. The water heater started after William reset it. He changed the rear lock with a spare cylinder from his truck. He gave Elizabeth 2 keys and handed Carolyn a third, only after Elizabeth nodded. By 5, the apartment had hot water, working lights, and a door Katie's key couldn't open. Carolyn returned with bread, eggs, soup, fruit, bottled water, and a folding camp chair from her garage. She also brought clean sheets and an electric kettle. Elizabeth paid for the groceries in cash. "You can settle up later," Carolyn said. "I'm settling now." Carolyn took the money. They ate soup from 2 mismatched bowls found in the office cabinet. William ate his standing by the counter. The 3 of them discussed the roof, the weak water pressure, and the smell from the furnace. Nobody discussed whether Elizabeth belonged there. That omission felt like respect. After supper, William walked the exterior. A section of flashing had lifted above the finishing room. Water had entered behind the brick facing and stained the inside wall. The damage appeared limited, but he wouldn't promise anything until he inspected the roof in daylight. "What about the apartment roof?" Elizabeth asked. "Lower section looks better. I'd still check it." "And the north wall? We leave it alone." "For how long?" "Until the electrical line is traced and the bench can be shifted safely." "You said the floor could carry it. I said we need to know whether it can." Elizabeth folded her arms. William met her eyes. "Harold bolted that bench through the slab for a reason. I'm not guessing with your floor or his bench. She didn't like waiting, but his caution sounded familiar. All right, she said. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I have a crew at the courthouse. Then the day after. I can come at 4. Carolyn, who had been drying bowls, stopped with the towel in her hand. A fire door, she said. William turned. What? I remember paying for a fire door. Elizabeth waited. Carolyn set the bowl down. Steel, insulated, commercial rating. Harold ordered it from a supplier in Provo. It was expensive enough that I asked what it was for. When? Elizabeth said. The year before he died. Late spring, I think. What did he tell you? That he was protecting the important work. William glanced toward the shop. Did the invoice include installation? He asked. No. Harold picked it up himself. Where did he install it? I assumed somewhere in the finishing room. We were using flammable products, and he'd been worried about fire separation. There's no steel door in the finishing room, Elizabeth said. I know that now. Why didn't you mention it when we measured the wall? Because I hadn't thought about that invoice in years. The conduit reminded me of the electrical charge that came later. What electrical charge? Wire, boxes, fixtures? Harold paid with the shop account. No electrician's invoice. Elizabeth looked through the apartment doorway toward the workbench. She could see only one end of it from the kitchen. Did he tell you what important work meant? No. Did you ask? Several times. He said I'd make him label it as an asset, and he wasn't ready. That sounds like him, William said. Carolyn nodded. I thought he was hiding special lumber from the insurance company. He wouldn't do that, Elizabeth said. No. But he enjoyed letting me think he might. The memory gave them a useful fact, and nothing close to an answer. Harold had bought a fire-rated door. A live line entered a section of wall wider than the rooms accounted for. Neither fact proved what was behind the workbench, or whether anything remained there. Elizabeth took out her phone and photographed William's red tape on the breaker. I'm calling the city tomorrow. William's expression changed. For an inspection? I'm living here. I need to know what has to be fixed. You may not like the answer. I already don't like guessing. The next morning, Elizabeth woke before 6 on a mattress Carolyn had borrowed from her guest room. The refrigerator hum and the occasional tick of cooling pipes kept the apartment from feeling abandoned. She made tea, ate toast over the sink, and took her medicine. The shower ran hot. The pressure was still weak, but it held. Afterward, she dressed in the blue work shirt and sat at the kitchen counter with the assisted living balance, the dealer invoice, and a blank notebook. She listed each action from the previous day. Power restored, water valve opened, exterior lock changed, unsafe bedroom outlet disconnected, tool invoice copied, revocation delivered. Below that, she wrote what remained uncertain. Storage location, original sale papers, missing patterns, roof, wiring, hidden wall space. Her phone rang at 7:12. Katie didn't greet her. Did you change the lock? Yes. I went by before work. You tried to enter? I brought the original papers. You could have called. I shouldn't need an appointment to check on my mother. You need permission to enter my property. William Yang's truck was there yesterday. How do you know? Aaron drove past. Elizabeth looked at the new key beside her notebook. Did Aaron drive past, or did you ask him to check? That's not the issue. It is to me. Katie's voice dropped. Mom, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You've been out one day, and now people are going through Dad's shop. William worked in this shop. Years ago. He came because I invited him. And Carolyn? I invited her too. What are you looking for? Elizabeth kept her eyes on the notebook. Katie didn't know about the conduit, the wall measurement, or the fire door. For once, Elizabeth didn't rush to fill the silence between them. I'm taking inventory. Of an empty building? Yes. Katie waited. When Elizabeth offered nothing more, she said, I have the papers in my car. Bring them after 5. Call before you come. I can't arrange my day around this. Then come tomorrow. Another silence followed. I'll come at 5:30, Katie said. Call first. Elizabeth ended the call and wrote Katie's planned visit in the notebook. At 8, she contacted the building department. She explained that the attached apartment was occupied again, and that she wanted the shop inspected before any repair work began. The inspector had an opening that afternoon. He arrived at 2 carrying a tablet, a ladder, and no interest in family explanations. He checked the apartment first, then the shop. He photographed the damaged outlet, the older panel, exposed wiring left where machines had been disconnected, and staining beneath the roofline. On the roof, he found loose flashing and two soft areas near the finishing room. Inside, he tested smoke detectors. The apartment detector failed. "You can replace that today," he said. "I will. The commercial area is the larger problem. Can I stay in the apartment? I'm not ordering you out today. It has water, heat, a separate exit, and working bathroom facilities. Keep the north wall circuit off. Don't use the furnace until it's serviced. Replace both smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. And the shop?" He showed her the notice on his tablet. The roof intrusion had to be stopped. Exposed wiring needed termination boxes. The older panel required evaluation by a licensed electrician. Damaged sections had to remain closed to work until corrected. How long? 45 days from today. What happens then? If the hazards aren't corrected, the commercial area can't be occupied or reopened. Continued roof damage could affect the apartment later. He emailed the notice and left a printed copy on the counter. Elizabeth called William. "I have 45 days, she said. "For what?" She read him the listed corrections. He was quiet for a moment. "That roof is more than a patch." "I know. My courthouse schedule is already tight. I know that too. And if your patterns are gone, I'll have spent time I don't have chasing them." Elizabeth looked through the open door at the workbench and the red tape on the breaker. "If the patterns are here, you need them. If that wall is hiding a fire-rated space, I need to know before anyone repairs around it." William exhaled. "I can bring a structural jack and 2 people Friday." "No people yet. You and Carolyn first. We inspect the bolts, trace the wiring, and plan the move. You're running the job now? It's my shop." He gave a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because the answer settled something. "I'll be there at 4, he said. Elizabeth pinned the inspection notice beside the office light switch. Then she put the new key in her pocket and carried the failed smoke detector out to the workbench, where she began making a list of everything 45 days would require. The first item was a new smoke detector. Carolyn brought 2 from the hardware store and refused to accept cash until Elizabeth showed her the receipt from the groceries. "You've become tiresome about money," Carolyn said. "I've become accurate. You were always accurate." "Then why are you surprised?" Carolyn stood on the office chair while Elizabeth steadied it. They replaced the apartment detector and added one near the inside shop door. Both sounded when tested. The sharp beeping hurt Elizabeth's ears, but she let each unit run for the full test. The inspection notice required working alarms. She wanted no uncertain item left uncertain because it was inconvenient. At 5:28, Katie called from the lot. Elizabeth unlocked the new rear door and stepped aside. Katie entered carrying a large envelope and a cardboard box. Her eyes went first to the changed lock, then to the folding chair and borrowed mattress. "You're really sleeping here?" "Yes, on the floor, temporarily." Katie set the box on the kitchen counter. "These are the original sale papers, the storage agreement, and what was left in my car." Elizabeth opened the box. It contained her old checkbook, 2 address books, a set of measuring glasses from the kitchen, and several loose keys. "Where are my shop keys?" Katie took them from her purse. There were 4 keys on Harold's brass ring. The office key, loading door key, apartment key, and cabinet key were all there. Katie held the ring a moment longer than necessary. "If there's an emergency, someone should have access. Carolyn has a key. You gave Carolyn a key but not me. Carolyn hasn't entered without permission." Katie put the ring in Elizabeth's palm. The keys were warm from her hand. Elizabeth sorted the papers on the counter. The storage agreement gave the address of a facility on the edge of Price. Katie had rented a unit in Elizabeth's name and paid 3 months from Elizabeth's account. The inventory said furniture, clothing, household goods, and framed pictures. It did not identify individual pieces. "Where's Harold's oak chest?" "In the unit." "And the shop cabinets?" "They went with the dealer. They aren't on his invoice. He took whatever he could use. That isn't an answer. I wasn't standing beside him with a clipboard. You signed the bill of sale." Katie's cheeks colored. "I was dealing with your hospital, rehabilitation, insurance, this building, and my own job. I did the best I could." Elizabeth looked at her daughter's tired face. The shadows under Katie's eyes were real. So was the fact that she had signed away property she hadn't bothered to name. "Why didn't you call me from the shop?" You were sick. I had a phone. You could barely finish a sentence without coughing. Then you could have waited. The dealer was available that week. Elizabeth unfolded the bill of sale. It included a number for the equipment yard. Did you ask what he planned to do with the hand tools? Sell them. To whom? I don't know. Were the cabinet keys included? Katie looked at the brass ring. I gave him the spare from the office. So he opened the locked cabinet. I assume so. You didn't watch. No. Katie removed her coat. She had come prepared to defend herself, but she had not expected questions with exact answers. Exact answers required her to admit where she had stopped paying attention. She noticed the inspection notice beside the light switch. What's that? A correction order. Katie crossed the office and read it. You called an inspector? Yes. Why would you do that before we sell? Because I'm living here. This says roof damage and electrical hazards. It also says what has to be repaired in 45 days. That's right. Do you know what this will cost? Not yet. Katie turned from the notice. This is what I was trying to prevent. You tried to prevent me from seeing it. I tried to keep you from being responsible for a failing commercial building. You tried to make the decision before I knew there was one. Katie pointed toward the shop. There's no business here. There aren't even tools. There's one. She didn't mean to say it. Katie followed her eyes to the workbench. William had marked the floor around its legs with white chalk. A line extended to the north wall where he had measured the unexplained depth. What are those marks? Measurements. For what? The electrical line? Katie stepped into the shop. Elizabeth went with her. The evening sun entered through the high west windows and showed dust hanging in the air. Katie stopped near the workbench but didn't touch it. Is this why William came? Partly. What does he think is back there? He doesn't know. Back where? Elizabeth looked at the blank section of wall. Katie understood enough to become still. Mom, this building has been measured and appraised. By whom? The realtor. Before or after the tools were removed? After. Did the realtor enter every room? I showed him the shop and apartment. Did he measure this wall? I don't remember. What appraisal did he give you? Katie folded her arms. It was an informal estimate. Meaning what? He walked through and gave a likely range. That isn't an appraisal. I didn't say it was official. You said the building had been appraised. Katie turned toward the office. I'm not doing this all evening. Leave the storage access code. It's in the envelope. And the assisted living agreement, I'll bring it later. Why isn't it here? Because it has my financial information. It also has mine. I said I'll bring it. Elizabeth wanted to demand it immediately. Instead, she opened the apartment door. Call before you come next time. Katie put on her coat. Aaron thinks he can help with the repairs. He hasn't seen the notice. I sent him a picture. Elizabeth glanced at the paper beside the switch. Katie had photographed it while they were talking. What does help mean? You'll have to ask him. Katie left. Elizabeth locked the door, then returned to the shop. The chalk lines looked more conspicuous now. Katie knew they were investigating the wall. Within an hour, Aaron would know too. Carolyn picked up the dealer's bill of sale. Do you want me to call? No, Katie signed it. I'll call, and if he won't speak to me, we'll learn what that signature still costs. The equipment dealer answered the following morning. His name was printed on the bill, but he spoke as though the sale had happened too long ago to remember. Elizabeth read him the invoice number. Oh, the old wood shop, he said. Yes, ma'am, I'm the owner. I dealt with your daughter. She was acting under a power of attorney that has been revoked. That doesn't undo a completed purchase. I didn't say it did. I want to know what you took. It's on the invoice. The invoice says assorted hand tools. That's what they were. Were they in a locked maple cabinet? A pause followed. There was a wall cabinet. Maybe maple. Where is it? The cabinet itself was damaged during removal. And the tools, some went in a bulk lot. Some are still here. Elizabeth straightened. Which ones? I'd have to check. I can't discuss individual resale items when I contracted with someone else. The items belong to me. Your daughter showed authority to sell. I'm not disputing what paper you saw. I'm asking whether my tools are still in your yard. He sounded less certain when he answered. Some could be. I'll give you the maker names and identifying marks. I still need to speak with the seller, Katie. Yes, if she authorizes it, you'll give me an inventory of what remains. Whatever hasn't been sold, and you won't dispose of more before then, I can hold the remaining hand tool lot for 3 business days. That's all I can promise. Send that promise by email. He agreed. 10 minutes later, a short message arrived. It confirmed that an unidentified portion of the hand tool lot remained at the yard and would be held for 3 business days pending authorization from Katie. Elizabeth printed it and placed it beneath the inspection notice. The deliberate call had worked. Some tools still existed. Recovering them now required the daughter who had sold them. At 4, William arrived with a circuit tracer, a long pry bar, 2 hydraulic jacks, and none of the extra people he had first suggested. Carolyn brought Harold's old account ledgers from her house. She had kept them after closing the books because Elizabeth hadn't wanted to sort financial papers while arranging the memorial. They began with the conduit. William shut off the main power and opened the junction box. 2 insulated wires and a ground entered from above. Another set continued through the lower conduit behind the bench. "No splices going anywhere else," he said. "This line serves whatever is beyond that wall." "Can you trace it without moving the bench?" Elizabeth asked. "Part of it." He clipped the transmitter to the dead wire. The handheld receiver gave a pulse when he passed it over the conduit. The signal continued behind the rear leg, entered the wall, then moved sideways. William marked its route with chalk while Elizabeth watched the receiver. The line traveled nearly 4 feet to the right and rose vertically. The signal ended at about shoulder height behind the wall. "Fixture height," William said. "Could be a light or a switch. Inside space we can't see," Carolyn said. "Probably." William repeated the trace twice. The result stayed the same. That was the useful answer. Harold had wired something inside the missing depth. It wasn't an abandoned feed ending under the workbench. They turned to the bolts. The 2 front nuts loosened after William sprayed them and waited. The rear left nut could be reached with a long extension. The final nut sat between the bench leg and the wall, hidden beneath a wooden brace. William lay on the floor and shone his light under the brace. He built this after the bench was in place. "How can you tell?" Carolyn asked. "The brace overlaps the nut. You can't remove the bench without removing the brace." Elizabeth knelt as far as her lungs allowed. William angled the light for her. The brace was maple, but newer than the main bench frame. Harold had attached it with square drive screws and glue. It did not strengthen the vise or support the top. It simply prevented access to the last anchor. "He meant the bench to stay," Elizabeth said. William rolled out from beneath it. "Yes." Carolyn opened one of the ledgers on the bench. "I found the door payment. The entry listed the supplier, the date, and the amount. 2 weeks later came a purchase for conduit, wire, a commercial light, and a ventilation fan. "No installation labor," Carolyn said. "Because he did it himself," Elizabeth answered. William studied the sequence, a sealed space with power and ventilation. "What would need that?" Carolyn asked. "Finishing materials, records, wood samples, anything he wanted dry and protected." "Patterns," Elizabeth said. William did not agree. He wanted them to be patterns, but wanting wasn't evidence. "We still have to move the bench," he said, "and now we know Harold made that difficult on purpose." Elizabeth's phone rang. Aaron's name appeared on the screen. She answered with Carolyn and William standing beside her. "I saw the inspection order," Aaron said. "Katie says you're tearing into the wall. No one has touched the wall. What are William and Carolyn doing there?" "Helping me inspect the building. I can cover the roof repair," he said. "But if I'm putting money into the property, we need an agreement." "What kind?" "I take over the building decisions. When the place sells, my expenses come out first." Elizabeth looked at the 3 loosened bolts, and the 4th one Harold had deliberately blocked. "And if it doesn't sell, then we discuss my share." "You mean ownership?" "I mean protecting what I put in." The roof deadline hung beside the office door. The dealer's 3-day hold lay beneath it. One problem required money. The other required Katie's cooperation. Both children had found a way to make help depend on control. "I'll read any proposal you put in writing," Elizabeth said, "but you get no share for being my son." Aaron was silent. Elizabeth ended the call and set the phone on Harold's bench. Then she told Carolyn about the 3-day hold and asked William to leave the rear brace untouched. Before they moved anything, she had to recover what remained outside the shop and decide how much of her children's help she could accept without giving the place away. Katie answered on the second call. "I'm at work," she said. "The dealer will hold the remaining hand tools for 3 business days." "What remaining tools?" "He still has part of the lot." "Then buy them if you want them. He won't discuss the inventory without your authorization." Katie was silent for a moment. "Why?" Because you signed as seller. I was acting for you. Then act for me now. Tell him he can speak to me. I need to see what I'm authorizing. Elizabeth had expected resistance, but not to something so simple. You're authorizing a list. He could claim I agreed to cancel the sale. He already told me the sale is complete, and now you've told him the power of attorney was revoked. I don't know what you said about me. I said you were my daughter, Mom. Elizabeth moved the phone away until Katie stopped. The hold expires Monday, she said. Send the authorization today. I have a meeting, then send it afterward. I'll look at it. That isn't an answer. It's the answer I have right now. Katie ended the call. A few minutes later, Aaron emailed a 2-page proposal. He offered to arrange and fund the required repairs. In return, he wanted control over contractors, approval of future shop spending, repayment from any sale, and an option to acquire a share if Elizabeth kept the property longer than 1 year. The language was clean. Aaron had probably used a business template. He had left the ownership percentage blank. Elizabeth printed the proposal and placed it beside the tool sale papers. The two documents differed in tone, but not in assumption. Katie had used authority Elizabeth gave her during illness. Aaron wanted authority before giving help. Both called control a practical necessity. She wrote no across the first page and put it in the drawer. At 10, William sent photographs from the courthouse. His crew had removed another damaged section, exposing 3 more marks. The markings were similar to the first, but not identical. Elizabeth enlarged them. One circle held 2 lines. Another held 3 lines with a notch below. The last had a small cross beside it. Harold's system wasn't decorative. Each change meant a different cutting order, tool setup, or matching location. She called William. The cross is probably a return piece, she said. Probably? I need the pattern index. Do you remember the numbering? Parts of it. Enough to reproduce the profile? Not safely. William didn't argue. A close copy might satisfy someone looking from the floor, but restoration required a profile that met the old wood without forcing it. A fraction of an inch in the wrong place could damage what remained. I'm coming after lunch, he said. Bring out Carolyn's ledgers. They're already here. Elizabeth spent the morning reading them at the workbench. Carolyn's entries were brief. A project name, labor hours, materials, payments, and sometimes Harold's internal job number. Elizabeth found the county courthouse under a renovation completed decades earlier. Beside the job number, Carolyn had written a group of pattern references. There were 8 for the windows, 4 for the doors, and 3 for the rail. Elizabeth copied them onto her notebook. She turned more pages. The same kind of references appeared beside work for an old hotel, a library reading room, 2 churches, and several houses. Some patterns had been used once. Others returned across projects with adjustments noted by letters. Carolyn arrived carrying a sandwich for Elizabeth and found her halfway through the second ledger. You've been sitting here all morning? Mostly. Did you eat anything? I was waiting for your sandwich. You didn't know I was bringing one. It worked out. Carolyn placed the sandwich on a clean sheet of paper. What did you find? Elizabeth showed her the references. I remember those, Carolyn said. Harold was forever changing the letters after I'd billed a job. How many pattern groups were there? I don't know. Hundreds, likely. Where did he keep the index? Usually in the flat files. The dealer took them, then perhaps the index went too. Elizabeth looked toward the north wall. Or Harold moved it. Carolyn did not answer. She understood why Elizabeth's eyes had gone to the workbench, but a wider wall and remembered doors still proved only hidden construction. They ate without pretending certainty. William arrived with a roll of courthouse drawings and spread them across the bench. The current restoration covered more than the West Hearing Room. His company had been hired to repair woodwork in adjoining spaces as later materials were removed. The full job depended on matching several generations of work. The county won't approve fabrication from photographs alone, he said. They need physical samples or verified working records. Verified by whom? Carolyn asked. A conservator acceptable to the project. You? No. I'm the contractor. I can say a pattern works. I can't authenticate where it came from. That distinction mattered to Elizabeth. William needed the archive, but his need could make him believe too quickly. She was relieved that he knew it. He matched the numbers from Carolyn's ledger to markings in his photographs. 3 aligned exactly. 2 likely belonged to pieces his crew hadn't yet exposed. This isn't one molding profile, he said. Harold built a system for the whole room. "The whole building," Elizabeth said. She opened the earlier ledgers and showed him the repeating groups. William moved slowly through the pages. "If the patterns still exist, this is larger than my current repair." "How much larger?" "I don't know until I see them. They could be rough shop templates. They could be master patterns. Some may no longer be usable. And if they are usable, then whoever controls them controls the accurate starting point for every matching piece." Carolyn touched one of the ledger entries. "Harold always said the pattern saved more time than the machine." "He was right," William said. Elizabeth looked around the stripped shop. When she returned from Willow Creek, she had wanted a bed behind a locked door. Then she wanted the building safe enough to keep. She had thought the missing patterns might help William with one stalled contract. The ledgers changed that. Harold hadn't collected scraps. He had preserved a working history of the shop. If it remained inside the hidden depth, it carried decades of choices that couldn't be rebuilt by measuring finished wood alone. The problem was no longer whether Elizabeth could stay in the apartment. Selling the building without knowing what it contained could scatter the last useful part of Morris cabinet millwork. A knock sounded at the office door. A roofing contractor William knew had come to inspect the damage. He climbed to the roof while the others waited below. When he returned, dust covered his knees. "The flashing failed first," he said. "Water got under the membrane. 2 sections of roof deck are soft. The insulation beneath them is wet." "Can you stop the leak without replacing everything?" Elizabeth asked. "For now. But the inspector won't accept a surface patch over soft decking." He described the repair in ordinary terms. "Remove the damaged section, replace the wet material, rebuild the edge, and install new flashing." The apartment roof did not need replacement, but the shop section had to be opened. "How soon?" Elizabeth asked. "I can start next week if materials arrive." He wrote an estimate and placed it on the bench. The total took most of the available cash in Elizabeth's savings account after ordinary living expenses. It did not include the electrical work, furnace service, or anything needed to shift the bench. William read it. "It's fair. That doesn't make it small. No, the contractor required a deposit to order materials." He could hold the date until the next morning. After he left, Carolyn said, "You don't have to decide today. I have 45 days. You could still sell." "To whom?" "Someone who will price every hazard against me and tear out whatever they don't understand." You could take Aaron's money and give him the right to decide what gets opened, repaired, or sold. Carolyn closed the ledger. She didn't disagree. Elizabeth called her bank and asked for her current balance. The representative requested the verbal password. "Blue Apron," she said. The words worked. Katie had not changed the account after the revocation. The tool sale deposit remained, reduced by storage charges and the assisted living payment. Elizabeth's savings were intact, but the roof deposit would take a serious portion of them. She called the contractor and authorized it. When the conversation ended, she wrote the amount in her notebook. Her hand paused before she subtracted it from the balance. Paying for the roof made leaving harder. If the hidden space held nothing but dust, the money would still be gone. The repair would protect a building her children wanted sold and a shop she wasn't physically ready to operate. She signed anyway. That afternoon, they began clearing the finishing room so the roof crew could work. Elizabeth sorted loose boards while William moved heavier pieces. Carolyn labeled boxes. The room grew warm. Fine dust rose from beneath an old shelving unit. Elizabeth carried a short stack of sample blocks into the shop and felt her breath tighten. She set the blocks down. The tightness did not ease. William reached her before she asked, "Sit." "I'm all right. You're not." He brought the folding chair. Carolyn took the oxygen unit from the apartment and fitted the tubing, while Elizabeth checked the meter on her finger. The number was lower than her discharge instructions allowed. She hated the concern on their faces. She hated more that it was justified. "I only carried 6 pieces," she said. "You carried 6 after working all day," Carolyn replied. Elizabeth used the oxygen until the number rose. Her breathing settled, but the episode left her hands cold and her shirt damp at the collar. William packed his tools. "We stop for today. I can label boxes sitting down." "No, this is my shop. That's why you need to be here tomorrow." The words landed without softness, and Elizabeth accepted them. She had returned determined to prove she could manage alone. That goal had become another kind of trap. If independence meant lifting every board, climbing every ladder, and refusing help until she collapsed, Katie would eventually be right for the wrong reason. Elizabeth removed the oxygen tubing. I'll direct the work, she said. You'll handle the lifting. Carolyn controls the records. Carolyn raised an eyebrow. Controls? Organizes? Better. William waited. And nobody starts or spends without my approval, Elizabeth added, including me. That I can work with, he said. Her phone chimed. Katie had finally forwarded an authorization to the equipment dealer. It allowed him to release an inventory but not return anything. The dealer's reply arrived soon after. He attached photographs of what remained. 2 hand planes, a set of carving gouges, several gauges, a brace and bits, 3 wooden molding planes, and a locked metal case sat on a pallet in his yard. Everything else had been sold or moved to other buyers. William studied the pictures. Those molding planes may correspond to the pattern sequence. May, Elizabeth said. She had learned to protect that word. The tools were useful, but the photographs showed how much had already left her reach. Recovering the pallet would not restore the shop. Repairing the roof would not restore it either. She turned to a clean page in her notebook and replaced her old list with 3 lines. Protect the building. Account for Harold's pattern system. Rebuild only work that can continue without destroying her health. Then she gave William the courthouse references and asked him to identify which physical patterns would be required first. William marked 5 references on the page. These are the first priority, he said. 2 window profiles, 1 return, the door casing, and the rail cap. How long before your crew needs them? Elizabeth asked. 12 days before the schedule starts slipping. Then you work on roof access in the mornings and courthouse work after lunch. William looked at her. You've assigned my mornings. You said your crew couldn't continue without the patterns. I said the work would slow. Same result, only later. Carolyn hid a smile behind her coffee cup. Elizabeth drew a line through the rest of the references. We don't search for everything at once. We need these 5 first. While you prepare the bench move, Carolyn and I finish the ledger index. And you rest every hour, William said. Every 90 minutes, 60, 75, agreed. Elizabeth wrote it down. She had no intention of letting William revise it later. The next morning, the roof crew delivered materials. Their truck was too wide for the side gate, so Elizabeth directed them through the loading entrance. She had them lay protective sheets across the shop floor and keep the wet roof debris away from Harold's bench. The foreman pointed toward the empty machine spaces. We can stack insulation along that wall. No, Elizabeth said. That circuit has to remain accessible. He chose another wall. Elizabeth spent most of the morning in the office with the door open. Every 75 minutes, the timer on her phone sounded. She drank water, checked her breathing, and sat whether she felt tired or not. It annoyed her. It also worked. By noon, the crew had removed the soft decking. Sunlight entered through a clean rectangle above the finishing room. The damaged insulation came down in heavy black bags. The roof structure beneath it remained sound. That was the first good surprise. The repair would not spread into the rafters or apartment wall. The original estimate held. While the crew worked, Carolyn entered the pattern references into a table. She used project names from the ledgers and left blank spaces where physical patterns would later be checked. We are not calling it an archive inventory, Elizabeth said. Why not? Because we haven't found an archive. What do you want me to call it? Historical pattern references. Carolyn typed the phrase. Less exciting, more accurate. At lunch, Elizabeth emailed Aaron a brief response to his proposal. She thanked him for offering repair money, declined every condition, and stated that no ownership or management interest was available. She did not explain what she was doing instead. He replied with one sentence. You're making this harder than it has to be. Elizabeth saved the email and returned to work. That afternoon, William drove her and Carolyn to the equipment yard. He brought the white truck because the remaining pallet wouldn't fit in Carolyn's car. The dealer had moved it under a corrugated shelter. Dust covered the wooden planes, and one of the gauges showed a spot of rust. The carving gouges were wrapped in an old canvas roll Elizabeth had sewn herself. Her initials were still stitched near the tie. She opened the roll and counted each handle. 2 were missing. The dealer checked his records. Those may have gone with the carving lot. This is the carving lot. There were loose pieces in another box. Who bought it? I don't give out customer details. Then contact the buyer yourself and tell him 2 marked Morris gouges were separated from their set. I can ask. Ask today. He looked at William, perhaps expecting him to soften the request. William examined the molding planes and said nothing. The locked metal case sat at the back of the pallet. Elizabeth tried the cabinet key from Harold's brass ring. It did not fit. "Did you force this?" she asked. "No. The corners are bent. That happened during hauling." William lifted the case onto a low table. The latch had been struck but remained closed. Elizabeth studied the lock, then took a smaller key from the ring. It turned. Inside, fitted into worn green cloth, were profile gauges, calipers, small squares, and Harold's numbered steel stamps. None of them had much value to a general tool dealer. Together, they formed the measuring kit Harold used when developing a pattern sequence. William picked up one gauge. "May I?" Elizabeth nodded. He opened it against the courthouse sample he had brought. The thin metal fingers settled into the curve. The fit was close, though not exact. "This was used on a related profile," he said. "Or it shifted in the case." "Could have." The dealer watched with new interest. "Is that set collectible?" "It's a working set," Elizabeth said. She closed the case. He named a price for the pallet. It was far more than the amount he had assigned to those tools in the original bulk purchase. "You paid for them once," Elizabeth said. "I paid for the whole shop lot. I've stored and sorted them since. You stored them for less than 3 weeks. They negotiated for 20 minutes. Elizabeth used the dealer's own invoice to separate the remaining hand tools from the machinery already resold. She deducted the cabinet damage and the 2 missing gouges. In the end, she paid less than half his first demand. It still hurt to buy her own tools. She used money from the tool sale deposit. Katie had created the loss, but the account belonged to Elizabeth, and waiting for an apology would let the hold expire. The dealer signed a detailed release this time. Elizabeth made him list every item. William loaded the pallet into his truck. As they left, Carolyn said, "You enjoyed that?" "No." "You made him rewrite molding planes 3 times. He spelled it wrong." Back at the shop, they placed the metal case in the office and locked the recovered tools in a storage cabinet William had brought from his warehouse. Elizabeth entered every item in Carolyn's table. The cabinet scraper remained in her shirt pocket. The following day, a licensed electrician evaluated the panel. He replaced the damaged bedroom outlet, enclosed the exposed machine wires, and confirmed that the north wall circuit could remain safely isolated. He did not disconnect the line behind the bench because Elizabeth wanted its route preserved until the wall was understood. He signed the electrical correction form and left. Elizabeth emailed it to the inspector. One section of the order was now complete. By the end of the week, the roof crew had replaced the damaged deck and flashing. Rain wasn't expected, so the repair had not yet been tested by weather, but the building was closed again. The finishing room smelled of new lumber instead of wet insulation. The practical gains changed the shop. Trucks came and went. Lights operated safely. Supplies were stacked in labeled areas. The office held current records instead of old mail. People driving along Foundry Road could see that the building was no longer waiting for demolition. On Friday afternoon, William set 2 hydraulic jacks near the workbench. He placed thick oak blocks beneath the frame, then inspected the added brace. "We can remove the screws without cutting it," he said. "Save the brace," Elizabeth replied. "I planned to. You were looking at the saw. I was looking past the saw." Carolyn sat at the workbench, recording each step. Elizabeth stood beside William while he backed out the first square drive screw. The screw resisted, then released with a short crack. The remaining screws came out cleanly. The brace stayed fixed by glue, so William worked a thin blade along the joint. He took nearly an hour to separate it without splitting the maple. When it came free, the final anchor nut was exposed. Behind the brace, Harold had written 2 small letters in pencil. E.M. Elizabeth touched them with one finger. Her initials could have meant nothing more than ownership of the bench after his death. Harold labeled shop fixtures carefully. Still, he had placed the letters where nobody would see them unless the brace was removed. Carolyn photographed the mark. William loosened the final nut, but did not remove it. "All 4 anchors are ready," he said. "And the lift? We raise one end a fraction, place a dolly, then repeat at the other end. The jacks carry the weight. Nobody carries the bench." "How far can we move it?" "Far enough to expose the wall." "Not until I bring the steel dollies." "When?" "Monday." Elizabeth checked the inspection calendar. They had used 9 days. The roof and electrical work were no longer the immediate threat. That gave them time to move the bench properly. At 5:30, Katie appeared at the loading door. She had called from the lot as required. Elizabeth let her in, but didn't leave her alone in the shop. Katie took in the new roof materials, electrical boxes, locked cabinet, and courthouse drawings spread across a side table. "You've spent the tool money," she said, "some of it, on the building and on recovering what the dealer still had." Katie looked at the storage cabinet. "You bought the tools back, the remaining lot. You could have asked me to negotiate. I did what the deadline required. I sent the authorization. After 2 days." Katie walked toward the workbench. The removed brace lay on padded supports. The 4 anchor nuts sat in a labeled container. "You're moving it on Monday. Why? To inspect the wall. What does this have to do with the courthouse?" Elizabeth glanced at the drawings. She had planned to put them away before Katie arrived. William answered from the finishing room doorway. "I'm trying to locate working references for restoration pieces. Dad's patterns, if they exist." Katie looked from William to Elizabeth. "Would someone pay for them?" "No one has offered anything," Elizabeth said. "That wasn't my question." William folded the nearest drawing. "Without authentication, there's nothing to price." The word changed Katie's attention. Until then, she had seen old tools and expensive repairs. Authentication suggested something that might be claimed, valued, or divided. "Were the patterns Dad's?" she asked. "They were used by the shop," Elizabeth said. "That doesn't answer me. It's the answer available now." Katie turned to Carolyn. "You kept the books. Who owned them?" Carolyn closed her laptop. "I'm not making an ownership statement from memory." Katie pressed her lips together. She walked to the north wall and studied the chalk marks. Then she photographed the workbench, the removed brace, and the courthouse drawings before Elizabeth told her to put the phone away. "I need to talk to Aaron," Katie said. "You don't need permission." "No, Mom. This time, I need to make sure we understand what you're doing before something belonging to Dad disappears." Elizabeth opened the loading door. Katie left with 3 photographs and the first clear reason she had seen to stop treating the shop as a liability. The first email arrived Sunday morning. Katie had sent it to Elizabeth, Aaron, William, and the public address listed for courthouse project questions. The subject line read, "Notice concerning Morris family materials." Elizabeth read it at the apartment counter while her tea cooled. Katie stated that any patterns created by Harold before his death might belong to his estate. She said the family had not consented to their removal, licensing, sale, or use. She requested that all work involving those materials stop until ownership could be reviewed. She did not claim to know that patterns were behind the wall. She wrote as if their possible existence was enough. Aaron had added his name at the bottom. William called before Elizabeth finished reading. "I didn't give her the project address," he said. "It's public. The county copied my project manager. They want an explanation before tomorrow." "What did you tell them?" "That no patterns have been found or used." "That's true. They also want confirmation that I have permission to use anything we may find." "You have my permission." "They want ownership confirmed." Elizabeth looked through the apartment door. The workbench remained bolted in place, though all 4 nuts were loose. The steel dollies were supposed to arrive the next morning. "Will they stop the courthouse work?" "Not all of it. They'll move my crew to plaster and paint." The millwork section pauses. "How long can it pause?" "Not long." "Are you still bringing the dollies?" William was quiet. "My company cannot help recover disputed materials while bidding to use them. It looks wrong. To whom? To the county? To my insurer? Possibly to anyone Katie contacts next." Elizabeth understood. William's need for the patterns had brought him to the shop. Now that same need made every action look self-serving. "Then don't bring company equipment," she said. "It isn't that simple. It usually is when someone says that. Elizabeth, if I move the bench and we find what I need, Katie will say I helped you take estate property so I could profit from it. And if you don't move it, my courthouse schedule slips. That's your choice." "Yes." She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. William had already given hours of work, brought equipment, and protected the bench from being moved badly. He was not one of her children, and he wasn't asking for the building. "I'm sorry," she said. "That was unfair. I know why you said it. That doesn't improve it." "No." They remained silent. Elizabeth could hear traffic on Foundry Road and the soft click of the refrigerator thermostat. "Come after work," she said, "without company tools. We'll decide what you can do without risking your contract. I'll come." Carolyn called next. Katie had copied her on a separate message asking whether Harold's ledgers proved ownership. What did you answer? Elizabeth asked. Nothing. Good. I don't like her implying I hid estate assets. Did she say that? She asked whether I had records that were withheld during the estate process. Elizabeth closed her eyes. You kept old business ledgers because I didn't want to sort them. I know why I kept them. So do I. But other people may not. There was the wider cost. Katie's email had changed the ledgers from neglected records into something that could be described as concealed. Carolyn had helped because she trusted Elizabeth. Now that help exposed her to suspicion. Bring every ledger to the shop, Elizabeth said. We'll list them, date the list, and keep them together. You think that will satisfy Katie? I'm not doing it for Katie. I'm doing it because the records should be accounted for. By noon, Aaron's truck pulled into the lot. Katie arrived behind him. They had called first, though only after reaching Foundry Road. Elizabeth met them in the office. Carolyn sat at the desk with the ledgers stacked beside her. She had already printed an inventory page. Aaron carried a folder. He looked around at the repaired outlet boxes and new section of ceiling beneath the roof. You've done a lot, he said. The required work. Who paid? I did. You used the tool money. I used my money. Katie stood near the door. The tool money came from Dad's equipment. It came from tools I owned. That's the question. No, it isn't. Aaron raised one hand. Can we not start that way? You both sent a claim to a public project, Elizabeth said. We started yesterday. It wasn't a claim, Katie replied. It was notice. Notice of what you hope to claim. Dad made those patterns. I worked beside him for 38 years. That doesn't automatically make everything yours. Elizabeth felt Carolyn watching her, not to judge, but to make sure she didn't let anger answer a question evidence had to answer. What are you asking for? Elizabeth said. Aaron opened the folder. A pause. Don't move the bench. Don't open the wall. Let us get advice. From whom? Someone who handles estates. The estate was handled after your father died. Not if property was missed, Katie said. You don't know there's property. Neither do you. Then why did you contact William's client? Because you were about to let him search for something he wants. William's conflict had troubled Elizabeth too. Katie knew it, and that made her counterstep harder to dismiss. A person could act selfishly and still identify a real risk. Aaron slid a paper across the desk. It proposed that any patterns or records found in the shop be held without use until the three of them agreed on ownership. Decisions would require all three signatures. Elizabeth read it once. You've given yourselves veto power. It protects everyone, Aaron said. It stops me from using anything unless you approve, only until ownership is settled. How would it be settled? We talk to someone. We negotiate. And while we negotiate, William's work stops. The inspection deadline continues, and I keep paying for the building. Aaron leaned forward. I already offered to cover repairs, for control and a share. That's how investment works. You aren't an investor, not if you refuse to let me be. Katie touched the inventory sheet beside Carolyn. What are these ledgers? Shop accounts, Carolyn said. Why weren't they included when Dad's things were handled? Because they were business records in my care. Whose business? Morris Cabinet and millwork. That isn't an answer. Carolyn removed her glasses. It's the answer I can support. I won't invent another one because you prefer it. Katie's face hardened. I'm trying to find out what belonged to my father. So is your mother. Aaron pushed the proposed agreement closer to Elizabeth. If you sign, we can keep this within the family. Elizabeth read that sentence on his face before he said it. Within the family meant out of William's hands, out of the county's view, and under three signatures. It also meant she would once again need her children's approval to act inside her own building. She returned the paper. No. Then what are you going to do? Katie asked. Document the bench move, record everything found. Use an independent conservator if there are materials requiring authentication. William had mentioned that requirement. Elizabeth had not yet chosen anyone. Aaron sat back. That costs money. Yes. And if the materials belong to Dad, then evidence will show what it can. That isn't a guarantee. No. Katie looked genuinely unsettled. She had expected her mother either to surrender or hide the search. Open documentation removed both choices. It also meant Katie couldn't describe the discovery as a private arrangement between Elizabeth and William. Nothing leaves the room, Elizabeth continued. Nothing is used until it's identified. Carolyn witnesses the inventory. William does not authenticate anything. Who does? Aaron asked. Someone with no interest in the project. Katie glanced toward the shop. And if you find nothing, then I paid to move a bench in my building. You can't keep spending like this. Elizabeth looked at her daughter. You no longer manage my spending. Katie picked up her purse. You think every question is an attack. No. I think your email was an attack on William's work. It was protection. For whom? Katie didn't answer. Aaron gathered the unsigned agreement. If you go ahead, don't ask me to pay for the roof. It's already paid for. Then don't ask for the next repair. Elizabeth opened the office door. They left together. Carolyn waited until the trucks disappeared from the lot. Are you sure about an independent conservator? Yes. You know what that means. It means someone else decides whether anything we find is what Harold said it was. And if ownership remains unclear, we follow the evidence. Carolyn ran her hand over the top ledger. Even if the evidence doesn't favor you? Elizabeth looked at Harold's pencil marks on the pages. She wanted the patterns to be hers. She wanted the shop to remain useful. Wanting either one did not give her the right to bend a fact. Even then, she said, William arrived at 6 in his personal car. He had spoken with the county. The project would remain paused on Morris-related mill work. He could not bring his crew or company equipment to Foundry Road until the ownership question was resolved. That was the real loss. The steel dollies stayed at his warehouse. His workers would not help with the bench. The schedule they had made was no longer possible. I can advise on the lift as a friend, he said. I can't receive or use anything found. Can you help choose an authenticator? I can give you the county's approved list. You choose from it. Do that. Carolyn showed him the inventory procedure. Every item would be numbered where it stood, photographed, and left in place. If they found papers, nobody would remove staples, clean surfaces, or rearrange order. William approved. The bench still needs proper dollies, he said. I'll rent them, and 2 lifting bars. I'll rent those too. The floor needs temporary support near the finishing room edge. Put it on the list. Each item added cost. So would the conservator. Katie's counterstep had removed William's company labor, delayed his project, and forced Elizabeth to prove what she could have quietly claimed. Elizabeth signed the rental order from the office computer. She paid for delivery with her own card. Then she wrote to the approved conservator, whose qualifications best matched historic woodwork. She explained only that a possible pattern collection might be exposed, and that ownership documentation could be present. She asked for an on-site examination after access was established. Before closing the shop, she taped Carolyn's inventory procedure beside the inspection notice. The north wall breaker remained off. The bench remained in place. Nothing had been won behind it. Still, Elizabeth scheduled the equipment delivery for Tuesday morning and accepted that opening Harold's protected space would expose its contents, her family, and her own claim to judgment she could not control. The rental truck arrived at 8:15 with 2 steel dollies, lifting bars, oak cribbing, and a portable support post. Elizabeth checked each item against the order before signing. William placed the support post below the finishing room edge. He tightened it only enough to carry weight without lifting the floor. Then he checked the slab around every bench leg with a straight edge. Carolyn set her phone on a tripod. The full bench and north wall remained visible in the frame. No clever editing, Elizabeth said. I wouldn't know how. You once removed Harold from a Christmas picture. He stepped in front of the camera while I was photographing the food. You still removed him. He was blocking the turkey. William looked up from the jack. Are we ready? Elizabeth checked the north wall breaker herself. It was off. Red tape remained across the switch. She carried the container of anchor nuts to the office, then returned with the cabinet scraper in her pocket and the key ring clipped to her belt. We're ready. William positioned one jack beneath the bench frame. He raised the front end less than an inch while Elizabeth watched the maple joints. Nothing shifted. He slid the first dolly under the legs and lowered the bench onto it. They repeated the process at the rear. The bench had remained in one place so long that dust and finish had formed a dark outline around its feet. Without the bolts, it looked less permanent, but it didn't look light. William attached the lifting bars to the dolly frames. You guide from the side, he told Elizabeth. Carolyn watches the wall clearance. I pull. Elizabeth placed one hand against the front vise. Slowly, the first pull moved nothing. William adjusted the wheels and tried again. The bench gave a low wooden complaint and rolled forward half an inch. "Stop," Elizabeth said. They checked every support. The floor held. The bench remained square on the dollies. They moved it another inch, then two. A narrow vertical strip appeared behind the right rear leg. It was painted the same gray as the wall, but the surface was steel. Carolyn lowered her clipboard. "There it is. Keep recording," Elizabeth said. They continued until the entire bench stood nearly 6 feet from its original position. A steel door occupied the wall behind it. Harold had covered the frame with narrow wooden trim and painted everything to match the plaster. The conduit entered above the latch side. There was no sign, window, or outside handle, only a flush key cylinder and a recessed pull. William stepped away from the lifting bar. "Fire rated. The invoice was real," Carolyn said. "It was always real, you know what I mean." Elizabeth approached the door. The painted surface held small scratches near the bottom, as if something heavy had once brushed against it. She examined the cylinder. One key on Harold's ring was smaller than the others, the same key that had opened the metal measuring case. She inserted it. It turned halfway and stopped. "Don't force it," William said. "I'm not forcing it." She withdrew the key, cleaned it against her shirt, and tried again while lifting slightly on the recessed pull. This time, the lock turned fully. The door opened inward. Cool, dry air moved into the shop. William switched on his flashlight, but did not enter. The beam showed a narrow room lined with shallow wooden racks. Numbered shapes stood upright in fitted slots. Long patterns hung from pegs. Boxes of gauges and carving templates rested on lower shelves. A covered work table occupied the center. Nothing had collapsed. There was no water stain on the ceiling. A small ventilation fan sat high in the far wall, and a protected light fixture hung above the table. Elizabeth reached inside and found the switch. The fixture came on. Every visible rack carried Harold's handwriting. William leaned toward the doorway, then stopped himself. "Those numbers match the ledger references." "Some of them," Elizabeth said. He pointed without crossing the threshold. "There." The courthouse group. Several patterns on the left wall bore the same project number Carolyn had found. The first 5 references William needed were arranged in order. The answer stood less than 10 feet away. He did not touch it. Elizabeth entered first. Her shoes made almost no sound on the sealed floor. She went to the courthouse rack and read the labels. Each piece showed the sequence mark cut into the back. 3 short lines, 2 lines, a cross for the return. The physical pieces agreed with the photographs, but Elizabeth did not call them authentic. She photographed them where they stood. Carolyn entered next and began the inventory. William remained outside until Elizabeth told him he could stand at the doorway. On the far wall, an open shelf held 2 binders and a clear document case. Harold had not hidden them in a locked drawer. He had placed them where anyone entering the room would see them. Elizabeth removed nothing. She read through the clear front of the case. The top page bore Harold's signature and the year 2018. Its heading identified an assignment of the complete Morris Restoration Pattern Archive to Elizabeth Morris. The first paragraph included the physical patterns, master profiles, gauges, templates, indexes, and the right to control their working use. Elizabeth stopped reading. Carolyn came beside her and adjusted her glasses. "I witnessed this. You knew about it?" "I knew he signed an assignment. He never gave me a copy. You remembered the fire door, but not this?" "I remembered signing something about patterns. I didn't remember the exact title, and I wouldn't tell you I knew what it said when I didn't." Carolyn pointed through the plastic. Her signature appeared below Harold's, beside the date. "He asked me to witness after business hours. You were visiting Katie that evening. I thought he would hand it to you when you came home. He didn't. He said he wanted it protected first." Elizabeth looked at Harold's signature. The final letters tilted upward, as they had when his hand tired. He died the following year without telling her where he had put the paper. For several seconds she was angry with him. The room might have been protected from fire, water, and dealers. It had not been protected from silence. Had he told her, Katie could not have described the shop as empty, and Elizabeth might not have let the pattern cabinets disappear without question. William read only what could be seen from the doorway. "If that document holds," he said, "the archive was assigned to you before Harold died." "If it holds," Elizabeth replied. She closed the steel door without locking it and called Neil Chen. He had answered her earlier message and reserved the afternoon in case the room existed. He arrived at 3 carrying a camera case, cotton gloves, measuring tools, and a portable light. Neil listened while Elizabeth explained the discovery. He reviewed Carolyn's inventory procedure and watched the uninterrupted recording of the bench move. Then he entered the archive room alone for an initial examination. He began with the courthouse group. He compared maker marks, wood species, tool traces, and the order indicated by the pattern labels. William provided the authenticated courthouse fragments, but did not tell Neil which pattern he expected to match. Neil worked without conversation. He placed thin protective film over one pattern and took its profile. Then he compared the tracing to the original molding fragment. The curves aligned. Small tool marks occurred in the same working sequence shown by Harold's symbols. He examined 5 more groups at random. Each carried consistent maker marks, materials, handwriting, and aging. The indexes in the binders matched physical shelf locations. Only after finishing the objects did he examine the assignment. Carolyn identified her signature and described the evening she witnessed Harold sign. She did not add what she thought he intended. She stated what she saw. Neil photographed the document through its case, then asked permission to remove it. Elizabeth gave permission. He wore gloves, opened the case, and checked the paper, ink, signatures, staple holes, and surrounding records. The assignment was not a later sheet inserted into an older collection. Its paper and handling matched the index materials prepared in the same period. "I authenticate objects," Neil said. "I don't decide legal ownership." "Understood," Elizabeth replied. "I can confirm that this is a coherent working archive created and maintained by Morris Cabinet and Millwork. The courthouse patterns correspond to authenticated original work. The assignment appears physically consistent with the date and records around it. Mrs. Nunez's witness identification is separate evidence. Can you put all of that in writing?" "Yes." Neil completed his finding at the office desk. He attached reference photographs and listed what he had examined. He made no statement about market value. Before leaving, he returned the assignment to its case and placed it on the open shelf where it had been found. His written finding removed the largest uncertainty. The room did not contain unrelated samples that merely resembled Harold's work. It held a working archive, and the assignment was part of the original protected collection. Neil packed his equipment and left. He had done the one job he came to do. William stood inside the shop, still outside the archive doorway. "The county will accept Chen's authentication," he said. "Not until the ownership dispute is answered. The assignment answers it. It supports my answer. Katie and Aaron need to see it." Carolyn closed the inventory file. "You don't owe them a private viewing. I'm not giving them one." Elizabeth could have sent Neil's finding to the county and let Katie learn through William's project. She could have used the tool sale records to embarrass her daughter and Aaron's proposal to make him look greedy. Both would have been easy now. They would also turn the proof into punishment. She called Katie first, then Aaron. She invited them to the shop the following morning. She said an independent examination had been completed and that William and Carolyn would be present. She did not describe the room or quote the assignment. Katie asked, "Did you find something?" "Yes." "Does it belong to Dad?" "Come at 10 and look at the evidence." Aaron asked whether they should bring someone. "Bring yourselves," Elizabeth said. "If you want advice afterward, get it afterward." She sent both of them Neil's finding before they could claim she had withheld it. Then she sent the same document to the courthouse project address Katie had contacted. The county acknowledged receipt but made no decision. William's work remained paused until Elizabeth established who could authorize use. That would happen in the shop, not through another family email. William rolled the workbench back far enough to keep the main aisle clear, but left the steel door fully visible. Elizabeth locked the archive and kept the key. Using the proof meant her children could no longer pretend the shop was merely a future inheritance waiting to be divided. It also meant she had to tell them, face to face, that Harold had placed the archive in her hands and that she intended to keep it there. She set 6 chairs near the workbench, placed Neil's finding and the documented assignment copies on the table, and left the original untouched inside the locked room. At 9:58, Katie's car entered the lot. Aaron followed in his truck. They came through the office door together. Katie carried a legal pad. Aaron had the same folder he brought before, now thicker. William and Carolyn were already seated. Elizabeth stood beside the workbench. The bench remained on its dollies, far enough from the north wall to expose the steel door. Katie stopped when she saw it. Aaron walked past her. "What is that?" "A fire-rated door," Elizabeth said. "Behind the bench?" "Yes." Katie looked at the chalk marks, the loosened anchors, and the open floor where the bench had stood. You moved it without us. You declined to help. We asked you to wait. You asked for control. Aaron approached the door. Is it locked? Yes. What's inside? We'll get to that. Elizabeth pointed to the chairs. Katie did not sit. Neil Chen's report says there's a pattern archive. It does. And an assignment. Yes. You sent us photographs, not the original. The original is protected where Harold put it. So you expect us to accept a paper we haven't seen. I expect you to look at it. Katie finally took a chair. Aaron sat beside her. He put his folder on his knees and left it closed. Elizabeth sat opposite them. William and Carolyn were off to one side, close enough to answer direct questions, but not arranged as a jury. Before I open the room, Elizabeth said, I want both of you to say what you believe should happen. Katie frowned. Why? Because I don't want another email afterward claiming you meant something else. Aaron looked at his sister. Katie opened her legal pad. We believe anything Dad created belongs to his estate unless there's valid proof he transferred it, she said. Until that's settled, no one should use or license the materials. That's clear, Elizabeth said. Anything else? You shouldn't be making business commitments while your health is unstable. My health isn't an ownership question. It matters if someone is pressuring you. Katie looked toward William. William kept his hands folded. Elizabeth said, Has William pressured me? He needs what's in that room. That isn't what I asked. I don't know what he said privately. He asked permission before touching every item. Katie wrote something on her pad. I still think independent advice is necessary. Neil was independent. He authenticated objects. He didn't decide ownership. That's correct. Aaron opened his folder. I'm less concerned with who said what to whom, he said. We need a practical agreement. If these patterns have business value, Mom shouldn't carry all the risk. Katie and I can help manage the property and develop whatever is there. In return for what? Elizabeth asked. A family partnership. You offered money for a share before you knew the room existed, because the building needed repairs. And now? Now there may be an operating business. There was always a business. It hasn't operated since Dad died. Elizabeth looked at him. I operated that shop before you could drive. I know you worked here. Worked here. Aaron glanced at William. Nobody's denying what she did. You just reduced it to helping your father. That isn't what I meant. What do you believe you own? He shifted the folder on his knees. Katie and I are Dad's heirs. I'm his widow. Yes, but if this property was left out when the estate was handled, then it should be divided correctly, even if he assigned it before his death. If the assignment is valid, that changes things. Changes what? Our claim, not my competence. Aaron rubbed his jaw. Mom, we've been trying to deal with the situation in front of us. You were seriously ill. The shop looked abandoned. Katie had authority. She had authority to help me during illness. She used it to replace my decisions. Katie closed her legal pad. I will not apologize for getting you care, she said. You couldn't breathe. You weren't eating. The doctor said you needed rehabilitation. The rehabilitation helped me. Then stop talking as if I dragged you somewhere. You changed a temporary stay into a permanent arrangement without asking. It wasn't permanent. My apartment was emptied because it wasn't safe. You didn't know that until I called the inspector. Katie's face went pale, then red. I was handling everything alone. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Aaron visited. He gave opinions. I did the paperwork, answered calls, found storage, dealt with bills, and sat beside you when you were too sick to know what time it was. Elizabeth remembered parts of those hospital days. Katie sleeping with her coat over her lap. Katie holding a cup while Elizabeth drank. Katie calling the nurse when the oxygen tube slipped. Those things were true. So were the choices Katie made later. You cared for me when I needed it, Elizabeth said. Then you kept deciding after I could decide again. Katie's eyes filled, but she did not look away. That doesn't make the tools yours, Elizabeth continued. It doesn't make the building yours. It doesn't make this room yours. Aaron leaned forward. Then show us what does. Elizabeth stood. She removed the small key from Harold's brass ring and opened the steel door. The protected light came on. Numbered patterns filled the racks. Gauges and carving templates stood in fitted places. The courthouse group remained on the left wall, exactly where Neil had examined it. Katie entered behind Elizabeth. She stopped beside the central table. The visible order of the room unsettled her, more than a pile of expensive objects would have. This wasn't something Harold forgot. He had planned the walls, ventilation, lighting, and every labeled position. The shop she called empty had contained its most useful part within reach of the workbench she offered to a dealer. Aaron examined the nearest rack. "Don't touch," Elizabeth said. He lowered his hand. Carolyn stood beside the open shelf. William remained outside the threshold. Elizabeth took the clear document case from the shelf and placed it on the central table. She opened it carefully and removed the assignment. Katie stepped closer. Harold's signature appeared at the bottom. Carolyn's witness signature sat beside it. The date was in 2018, before Harold's death. Elizabeth read only the operative paragraph. Harold assigned the complete Morris Restoration Pattern Archive, including its physical patterns, indexes, gauges, templates, and control of working use, to Elizabeth. She turned the page so Katie and Aaron could read it themselves. Aaron read twice. Katie looked at Carolyn. "You witnessed this?" "Yes." "Did Dad understand what he was signing?" "Completely." "How do you know?" "He explained it before he signed. He said Elizabeth had built the working system with him and would know what should be preserved, shared, or retired." Elizabeth looked at Carolyn. That was the first time she had heard Harold's explanation. Carolyn continued before the words could become sentimental. "I watched him sign. I watched the date go on the page. That is what I can testify to." Katie studied Neil's authentication photographs beside the original. "Could he assign business property without telling the rest of us?" "You were not an owner," Elizabeth said. "Neither were you, according to anything we saw when the estate was handled. This assignment says otherwise for the archive." Aaron sat back on his heels. "So the room and everything in it are hers." "The archive is hers," William said from the doorway. "The room is part of her building." Katie turned sharply. "You don't decide that." "No," Elizabeth said. Harold did. That was the decisive fact. Neil had confirmed the collection and its physical history. Carolyn confirmed the witnessing. Neither created Elizabeth's ownership. Harold's signed assignment had done that before his death. Katie's estate claim had nowhere to stand without denying the document in front of her. She did not deny it. Aaron returned to the shop and sat down. "What are you going to do with it? Protect it? Finish the inspection, put the shop back into limited use. By yourself?" "Under my supervision, so William gets access, under a license, not ownership." Aaron looked at William. "You already made a deal?" "No. You had drawings here before the room opened. I had a stalled courthouse job. And now?" William brought a sealed proposal from his case. He placed it on the workbench in front of Elizabeth, not in front of the family. "Now I can make an offer to the owner." Katie came out of the archive room. "For what?" William answered Elizabeth. "Reproduction of the missing courthouse millwork and a limited license to use the necessary archive patterns under your supervision. My company supplies the crew, machinery, insurance, and materials." He opened the proposal. The contract value was $180,000. Payment stages were tied to approved samples, completed millwork, and installation. The archive would remain at Foundry Road. No pattern could be copied for unrelated work without Elizabeth's written permission. Aaron stood. $180,000? "That's the contract value," William said. "It includes labor, materials, installation, and licensing. It is not the cash value of the room." Katie looked through the steel doorway again. Her belief had shifted visibly. She no longer saw the room as boxes their father might have forgotten. She saw work, authority, and money moving toward their mother without passing through either child. "We need time to review this," she said. "You don't," Elizabeth replied. "I do. If Dad's work supports the contract, Aaron and I should have some part in it. The assignment gives you none. I'm not only talking about legal ownership. I paid for Willow Creek. I handled everything while you were sick. You used my account for most of it. Not all. Bring me a complete statement. If I owe a proper expense, I'll pay it. That does not buy part of this contract." Aaron touched the proposal. "You'll need management, more equipment, workers. I can organize expansion. I'm not expanding. You don't even know what this could become. I know what my lungs can support. I know what the building can support. I know the difference between useful work and growth for its own sake." William waited while Elizabeth read the first page. She reached the section naming the archive owner. Her name appeared alone. "I'll review every term," she said. "Carolyn will check the payment schedule. I'll accept only if supervision hours are limited and the archive stays here." William nodded. "Those terms are workable." Aaron removed his hand from the paper. Elizabeth returned the original assignment to its case. She carried it back through the steel doorway and placed it on the open shelf. Then she locked the archive and kept the key. Katie and Aaron still had their chairs, their questions, and whatever relationship they were willing to rebuild. They no longer had a claim to the patterns, control of the building, or a place in the contract simply because they expected one. Katie remained in the office after Aaron left. He took his folder and walked out without saying goodbye. His truck started hard, backed across the gravel, and turned toward town. Katie stood beside the counter with her legal pad pressed against her coat. "You made me look dishonest in front of William," she said. "You contacted his client before asking to see the evidence. I was protecting Dad's estate. You were protecting a claim you hoped you had." Katie looked toward the locked archive. "I didn't know he transferred it. Neither did I." "That's different." "Yes, it is." Katie expected Elizabeth to explain the difference, but Elizabeth was finished explaining facts that were already on the table. "I want repayment for Willow Creek," Katie said. "I paid the first charges myself before I could access your account. Bring receipts. I have bank records. Bring those too. And the time I missed from work? No." Katie stared at her. "I spent days dealing with your care. You were my daughter helping while I was ill. If you want to put a price on every hour, you should have said so before making decisions in my name. That's cold. It's a boundary." Katie picked up her purse. "And the contract? You have no part in it. I could handle the billing. Carolyn will handle the billing, so everyone gets a place except me. You asked for ownership after selling the tools that made the shop work. I said I made a mistake. No. You said you were busy." Katie opened her mouth, then closed it. Elizabeth unlocked the office door. "Bring the expense records. We'll handle what I owe. Nothing else is settled." Katie left more quietly than Aaron had. William's revised proposal arrived the next morning. It limited Elizabeth's on-site supervision to scheduled sessions with rest periods. She could stop work if archive materials were handled incorrectly. His company would build reproductions with its own machinery until Morris cabinet and millwork passed inspection. Carolyn checked every payment stage. "The final payment depends on county approval," she said. "That's normal. The licensing payment should not." "You're right." William changed the term. The license fee became payable when the selected patterns entered approved use, regardless of later installation delays. Elizabeth signed the contract. William signed after her. He sent the assignment, Neil's finding, and the executed license page to the county. The project administrator accepted Elizabeth's authority to approve use. The paused millwork work could resume. No official restored the shop for her. The county confirmed only that William now had permission from the documented owner. That afternoon, Elizabeth unlocked the archive and removed the first courthouse pattern herself. William placed a padded support beneath it. Carolyn recorded its number and condition. The wood felt lighter than Elizabeth expected. She remembered Harold shaping the edge, though not the year or project. He had probably worked after supper while she prepared cutter setups for the following morning. Their work had overlapped so often that neither of them could have separated who did what without the records. William did not call the pattern his until Elizabeth signed the temporary use entry. He carried it to his vehicle in a fitted case and returned the archive key to her, even though she had never given it to him. 2 days later, Katie brought a binder. It contained the assisted living agreement, hospital correspondence, storage contract, account statements, and original dealer messages. She had arranged them by date. A yellow tab marked the charges she paid personally. Elizabeth reviewed each receipt at the workbench. She reimbursed the first facility payment and 2 pharmacy purchases. She refused a charge for meals Katie bought while visiting the hospital and a day of missed wages Katie had calculated herself. "You would pay a professional caregiver," Katie said. "You didn't ask to be hired. I'm not asking to be hired. You put a wage claim in the binder." Katie removed that page. "Fine." Elizabeth wrote a check for the documented expenses. Katie took it, but didn't put it away. "The dealer sent me the buyer information," she said. "I thought he wouldn't release it. He contacted them first. 2 agreed to let me call." "Which tools?" "The missing gouges went to a wood carver in Green River. A small chest of planes went to someone in Huntington. There was also a box of measuring tools sold with the drill press. Can they be recovered? The wood carver will return the gouges if the shipping is paid. He said he knew they belonged with the canvas set once he saw the initials. And the planes? The buyer wants what he paid. Give me the amount." Katie shook her head. "I'll cover it." "That doesn't buy part of the contract." "I know. Or access to the archive. I know. Elizabeth watched her daughter's hand tighten around the check. Why are you doing it? She asked. Because I sold them. It wasn't an apology. It was better than the explanations Katie had offered before. They drove to Huntington the next morning. Katie arranged the meeting, carried the plane chest to the car, and checked the buyer's receipt against the dealer's records. She paid with her own card. At the shipping counter, she paid for the gouges from Green River and gave the clerk the shop address. On the drive home, neither woman discussed the assisted living room or the contract. Katie asked which planes mattered. Elizabeth showed her the numbers stamped beneath the handles and explained how a matched pair cut opposite sides of a molding. Katie listened without pretending she remembered Harold teaching her. At the shop, Elizabeth entered the planes in the recovered tool inventory. Katie waited near the office. Can I see the archive again? She asked. Not today. Katie's face tightened. Then she nodded. All right. She left without testing the boundary. Aaron did not call for nearly a week. During that time, William brought 2 adult craftspeople from his company to study the first courthouse sequence. They entered the archive only with Elizabeth present. She showed them how Harold's symbols marked cutter order, grain direction, and return pieces. Elizabeth worked seated for part of each session. The first time she put on her blue apron, her hands trembled while tying it. She rested them against the workbench until they settled. The roof repair passed its first rain without leaking above the finishing room. Water collected along the loading side gutter, however, where 2 old brackets had pulled away from the brick. It spilled down the wall near the electrical service. The roofing contractor said the gutter wasn't included in his original scope. The inspector added it to the remaining exterior correction because water was reaching the service area. Aaron arrived that evening with a ladder rack on his truck. I heard about the gutter, he said. From Katie? From the contractor. Elizabeth stood in the loading doorway. What do you want? To fix it. Under what agreement? None. You sent me a partnership proposal. I know. You still believe the shop should expand. I believe $180,000 is a large contract. It is. And I think there's more work if you build the right operation. I'm not building the operation you want. Aaron looked past her at William's crew packing sample cases. I know that too. It wasn't surrender. Aaron still believed his plan made sense. He had simply learned that being certain did not give him a share. The gutter needs new brackets, he said. The upper board may be soft at one end. I can work with the roofer so the repair stays under his warranty. You're not climbing alone. I already arranged for one of his crew to meet me tomorrow. Send me the material list. He did. The next morning, Aaron and the roofer's worker removed the damaged section. Aaron replaced the soft end board, installed new brackets, and reset the gutter so it drained away from the electrical service. He worked from the scaffold, not a loose ladder. Elizabeth approved the material purchase but did not offer equity. Aaron did not ask. At lunch, he sat on the loading step with a sandwich. Elizabeth brought him water. I should have stopped Katie from selling the tools, he said. Yes. I thought clearing the shop would make the sale easier. I know. I didn't understand what was here. You understood it wasn't yours yet. Aaron looked down at the bottle in his hands. That's fair. No. It's accurate. He finished the repair before leaving. He did not ask to enter the archive. Katie's binder remained in the office. Aaron's rejected proposal remained in the drawer. Elizabeth kept both because repair did not erase the actions that made repair necessary. The inspector scheduled the final visit for the following Thursday. The furnace still needed service, the shop needed a clear emergency path, and the workbench had to be returned to a safe working position without blocking the steel door. Elizabeth assigned each task a date and a person. Her own name appeared beside archive supervision and bench setup, not ladders, roofing, or lifting. The furnace technician arrived Tuesday and found dust in the burner compartment, a weak igniter, and a cracked belt in the blower. He cleaned the unit, replaced the worn parts, and tested the exhaust before signing the service tag. Elizabeth paid the invoice and taped a copy to the inspection file. On Wednesday, William returned the workbench to its original line without placing it over the door. He set it 6 feet farther into the shop, parallel to the archive wall. The front vise faced the main aisle. Both steel door and north wall junction box remained accessible. The old anchor holes in the slab were cleaned and capped. William installed new floor anchors only after Elizabeth checked the working height and clearance around every side. 2 inches left, she said. That puts the vise close to the aisle. 2 inches. He moved it. Elizabeth stood at the front edge and rested both palms on the maple top. The bench felt familiar, but its position changed how the whole room worked. A person at the vise could see the archive door without blocking it. Materials could move from the protected racks to the bench in a straight line. Harold had built the room for preservation. Elizabeth adjusted the shop for use. The inspector came Thursday morning. He checked the roof repair, gutter drainage, furnace tag, electrical corrections, alarms, and emergency path. William's sample cases had been moved away from the exit. The archive door opened fully without touching the workbench. The inspector looked at his tablet. The listed hazards are corrected. Is that a pass? Elizabeth asked. It's a completed correction notice. Any future machinery installation requires proper connections and clearances. I know, I'm required to say it. Then you've said it. He closed the notice and emailed the final copy before leaving. Elizabeth printed it in the office. She removed the original 45-day order from beside the light switch and placed both pages in the inspection file. She didn't throw the first one away. Carolyn arrived with a small bakery box. You passed? She asked. We corrected the order. That means you passed. It means the building passed. Carolyn opened the box. Eat a cinnamon roll and stop editing good news. They ate at the workbench. The gouges from Green River arrived that afternoon. Katie brought the package from the front office because she had been tracking it. She waited for Elizabeth to open the loading door. All the missing handles were there. Elizabeth fitted them into the canvas roll, the stitched initials aligned near the tie. Katie photographed the completed set for the recovery inventory and handed the phone to her mother for approval before saving it. I found one more buyer, she said. He has a box of squares and marking knives. Did he agree to return them? He wants proof they were part of your shop. We have the dealer invoice and photographs. I'll send those. You can give him my number. Katie nodded. All right. She did not offer to negotiate ownership for Elizabeth. She connected the two people who needed to speak and stepped back. A week later, Katie rented a small moving truck and returned the contents of the storage unit. She brought the oak blanket chest, kitchen table, chairs, lamp, framed photographs, curtains, and boxes of clothing. Elizabeth checked every item against the storage inventory. One framed photograph was missing. Katie searched the truck, then drove back to the storage facility. She found the picture leaning behind a stack of unused pallets. It showed Harold and Elizabeth beside a walnut bookcase they completed for the old library. Katie returned it without saying the facility had misplaced it or that she'd been too busy to notice. She cleaned the glass and hung it where Elizabeth directed. When the work was done, Katie stood near the apartment door. Do you want me to stay for supper? Not tonight. The answer hurt her. Elizabeth saw that. Call me Sunday, she added. We'll choose a day. Katie accepted the smaller opening. Aaron came the following week to check the gutter after heavy rain. He called from home before driving over. Water had drained properly, and the brick near the service entrance remained dry. He walked into the shop only after Elizabeth invited him. The courthouse sample stood clamped to the workbench. Elizabeth had used one recovered molding plane to adjust a test piece William's crew cut slightly proud. A thin curl of walnut lay beside the vise. Aaron touched the curl, not the sample. Dad used to leave these in his pockets, he said. They went through the washing machine. He blamed the washing machine. Aaron smiled. He asked how the contract was going. He did not ask to see the payment schedule or propose expansion. Before leaving, he replaced a loose weather strip on the loading door because Elizabeth had written it on the maintenance board. Neither visit restored the old family pattern. Katie no longer sorted Elizabeth's mail. Aaron no longer walked through the building, discussing what would happen after she died. They called before coming. If they forgot, the door stayed locked until they did. Elizabeth did not make Sunday dinner every week. The first time they ate together again, Katie brought soup and Aaron brought bread. Elizabeth provided bowls. Carolyn joined them, and William arrived late from the courthouse with sawdust on his coat. They ate in the apartment because the shop remained a workplace. When Katie began to clear Elizabeth's plate, Elizabeth said, "I'm still eating." Katie put it down. A month after the archive opened, the county approved William's first reproduction sample. The payment due at that stage went directly to Elizabeth's business account. Carolyn recorded the license portion and separated repair costs, taxes, and operating expenses. Elizabeth insisted on paying Carolyn for bookkeeping. "I'm retired," Carolyn said. "You're working. I could volunteer." "You could. You aren't." Carolyn accepted a limited monthly fee and set office hours she routinely ignored. William's craftspeople came twice each week for instruction. Both were experienced adults who knew machinery and joinery. What they didn't know was Harold's sequence. Elizabeth taught them to begin with the pattern rather than the cutter. She showed them how a small notch indicated grain direction and why a return piece had to be fitted before the long molding was finalized. She did not stand through entire sessions. A high stool remained beside the bench. Her oxygen unit stayed in the apartment where she could reach it. When her timer sounded, she stopped, even if someone was waiting for an answer. The first few times, stopping embarrassed her. Then the crew learned to use the pause for measurements and notes. Her hands still stiffened in the morning. She warmed them in a basin of water and worked the joints slowly. She no longer tried to carry boards wider than her reach. The shop began earning money without requiring Elizabeth to pretend she was untouched by age or illness. Not every lost tool returned. Some buyers refused. Others could not be located. The cabinet saw and jointer were already operating in different shops. Elizabeth listed those losses without softening them. Williams' company supplied the heavy machinery for courthouse fabrication. Morris cabinet and millwork did not need to become what it had been before Harold died. Elizabeth bought only what supported the work she could supervise and perform safely. She installed a smaller cabinet saw with proper dust collection. A new sharpening station occupied the wall where the old tool cabinet had hung. The recovered planes and gouges went into locked drawers beneath the bench. The steel archive door remained visible. Katie eventually asked whether she could help scan Carolyn's index. "Not the assignment," Elizabeth said. "I know, and no files leave the office. I know." Elizabeth gave her one project folder at a time. Katie scanned, named, and returned each file. When she finished, Carolyn checked the work. Aaron built a covered rack for roof materials and maintenance supplies. He submitted a drawing first. Elizabeth shortened it by 8 inches so it wouldn't crowd the loading door. He rebuilt it without complaint. Their actions earned tasks, meals, and conversation. They did not earn shares. By autumn, the West Hearing Room pieces were complete. William brought the final rail cap to Foundry Road for Elizabeth's approval. She checked the profile against Harold's master pattern and found one shallow place near the return. William leaned over it. "I can barely see that. You can feel it." He ran his thumb along the curve. "You're right." His crew corrected it. When the installed work passed county review, William made the final contract payment. The archive license ended for that project, while the patterns remained on their racks behind the steel door. Elizabeth kept a copy of the completed work order beside Neil's finding. The assignment stayed in its case inside the archive. She continued accepting only work that suited the shop, the archive, and her health. Some weeks she worked 3 mornings, other weeks she worked 1. Useful work waited for her schedule now. The apartment changed too. The oak chest returned to the foot of her bed. The good lamp stood beside her chair. Her medicines remained in a weekly box, but Elizabeth filled it herself. A spare key hung in Carolyn's kitchen. Katie and Aaron had no key. One Friday, Elizabeth found the brown suitcase still standing behind the bedroom door. She had lived at Foundry Road for months, yet several blouses remained folded inside. She unpacked them. She placed the suitcase on the top shelf of the closet and closed the door. If stories about reclaiming dignity after family abandonment matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. That evening, William's crew left before 6. Carolyn closed the ledgers and took the last cinnamon roll home. Katie had called about Sunday's soup. Aaron had sent a photograph showing the gutter clear after another rain. Elizabeth walked through the shop alone, checking switches and drawer locks. The restored workbench held a courthouse pattern, a sharpened plane, and 1 curl of walnut. The archive door stood closed but uncovered, its key secure in Elizabeth's pocket. She switched off the overhead lights. The lamp above the bench remained on, casting a wide gold shape across the maple top. In the apartment, the kettle clicked off. Elizabeth removed her apron and hung it beside the inside door. She checked the lock, looked once toward the lit shop, and turned the apartment key. At dusk, Elizabeth closed the apartment door while warm light from the working shop fell across Harold's workbench.